will gain even more power. Opening the lines, ask you, what happens next? Can the ship of American democracy be righted? And what does happen when the people in leadership who tolerate this kind of behavior take power in Washington, which is very likely that they will come January? The number is 877-301-8970. Of course, you can call us or text us there, or you can tweet us at BOS Public Radio. By the way, I want to be clear here. This is not the rage that Marjorie and I feel and the anxiety we feel is not cooked for radio. We talk about this every moment we are not on the air.
It's like people have lost their marbles.
I agree.
You know, if your friend called you up and said, Marjorie, a spaceship is just flying saucer has just landed in my backyard. And then you go on television and say, there's a flying saucer on High Street in downtown Boston. I mean, this is what they're doing. There's no effort to check any of the facts. It's like, this guy's
No, excuse me.
What?
You're acting as if they believe these things because they didn't check the facts. They advance these things because it's convenient to upend democracy.
Well, maybe they. Why don't we hear from Don Bolduc? Now, he is a retired Army Brigadier General. God help us. He's running pretty close to Maggie Hassan, the Democrat up in New Hampshire. Here he is at a campaign event just last week, talking about the claim that students at New Hampshire schools are allowed to identify as cats and use litter boxes.
They're putting litter boxes, right? Litter boxes for them. And let me ask you, these are the same people that are concerned about spreading germs, yet they let children lick themselves and then touch everything. And they're starting to lick each other.
Let me ask you a question. I don't know anything about Bolduc.
How do you know he doesn't believe this?
Well, he's either the dumbest man in America or one of the dumbest five, or he doesn't believe it. And by the way, in terms of this, if you haven't caught all this, we're just going to give you a quick summary, then get to your calls and texts. Carrie Lake, who is winning in the Arizona governor's race, she's an election denier extraordinaire. Here she is talking about the attack on Paul Pelosi during a campaign event on Monday. And listen to the audience reaction after she says what she has to say.
It is not impossible to protect our kids at school. They act like it is. Nancy Pelosi, well, she's got protection when she's in D.C. Apparently her house doesn't have a lot of protection.
And to add to that, the only more sadistic individual who I can think of, other than Donald Trump himself, is his little pathetic son, Don Jr., who after this happened, tweets in jest again, in sadistic jest, a picture of underpants and a hammer to advance what Elon Musk was allowing to be advanced for 3 hours till he pulled it down shortly after he took over Twitter, about this total lunatic conspiracy notion that Paul Pelosi at 82 or 83 was involved with some male prostitute and both. I mean, it's just, it is so demented and so out of control. It is just unbelievable. And if people are not worried, as bad as it is now, what happens when Kevin McCarthy, which he will be, is the likely Speaker of the House on come January? You are just denying reality yourselves.
Well, listen to this. We have a governor's nominee, Heidi Ganahl. She's out in Colorado. She talks about students dressing and identifying as cats and using litter boxes in the bathroom. We have Minnesota gubernatorial nominee Scott Jensen asking why there are litter boxes in these different school districts. This is like all around the country. They had a Republican member in Ohio on the State Board of Education. They have representatives in Tennessee. They have people across America. Joe Rogan was talking about this. The guy that, remember people left Spotify, Joni Mitchell and Neil Young left Spotify because of Joe Rogan spreading false information about vaccines. Well, he's talking about litter box. He said on his show that his wife's friend works for a girl who identifies as an animal. I mean, he hears these things from his wife's friends.
Yeah, but can I tell you something? I know you're obsessed with litter boxes, as much of America is, and it is sick. It is not even close to the threat that this permission, acceptance, humor about political violence is. I mean, this is just, we're going to talk a little bit later in the show with the head of the ACLU in Massachusetts about the training they're doing for election workers. Why? Because election workers are quitting in droves, because if you do the right thing, you know what happens to you? You get a death threat from somebody. I mean, it is just, I mean, I'm amazed, and I think you are too, how passive we are as Americans in the face of this. Am I missing something, or do people seem to now accept this is just part of American political life?
Listen, back in 2017, when at the Republican baseball game, when Steve Scalise was shot and nearly killed, and it turned out that the shooter was a Bernie Sanders supporter, Bernie Sanders immediately got up and said, "This is disgraceful. This is awful. This is terrible." And Mike Pence, the former vice president, for whom Nancy Pelosi showed a lot of concern on the day of the Capitol riot when there were the gallows there, he sent his condolences to the family. Mitch McConnell said something. Kevin McCarthy said something. So
have they condemned Glenn Youngkin? Have they condemned Carrie Lake? Have they condemned Don Jr.? And by the way, just let me get one more example here, and then we're going to get to your calls. Do you know who also went out of his way to say what a loss it was that Jerry Lee Lewis died the other day, and on the same day that Paul Pelosi was attacked, said nothing about that? That would be the likely Republican nominee for president in 2024, Donald Trump.
But I'm sorry to keep obsessing over the litter boxes, as
so
you
am
say.
I.
But the thing is, I do think some of these people believe this.
Well, so they do.
I think people now, what's happened now is, we're in the journalism business. I've been a reporter all my life. You're supposed to verify facts. You're supposed to double check things to make sure they're true. People hear things, people that are running for governor that may win, and just repeat these crazy things like they've taken leave of their senses. And it's just, I don't know, it's really kind of bizarre. And the other thing that's bizarre is that someone who's 82, which is Pelosi's husband, that anybody would make a joke about a person who's 82 being hit in the head with a hammer. The guy's in intensive care. He's in intensive care. He probably has lost some function in his brain. They talked about last night, it's going to be a long recovery. Who jokes about that?
Well, by the way, beyond the joke about the damage done to him, I think we all agree if Nancy Pelosi was home, in all likelihood, she'd be dead. I assume that's funny, too. Let's take some calls. 877-301-8978. Are you as worked up about this as Marjorie and I are? And if you are, what are you doing about it? And what is America doing about it? Let's start with John and Gardner. John, welcome to the show. Hi.
Good morning, kids. Thanks for taking the call.
Sure.
I used to watch a little too much Fox News. Now I watch Brett Baer's program, and sometimes I do flip through the 5 before that. Last night, the ball game was rained out, so I flipped over to Tucker Carlson. For the first time, I watched his whole spiel, 20-minute monologue.
Really? Yeah.
A couple of things. Liz Cheney, by the way, is a far-left Democrat. The Democrats have purposely screwed up the economy and the cities, i.e. crime. Purposely, he emphasized that. And all the other stuff I can't even try to replicate, but the way he does it with the innuendo and pulling a little thread here and this, that, it's unbelievable.
By the way, for those who don't know, and I'm sure most people do, that liberal Democrat, Liz Cheney, voted with Donald Trump 93% of the time when he was president of the United States.
He's very good at what he does, John. He's a very smart guy. He's very clever, and he's conned millions of people. I mean, that's what it is. It's a big con, but he's very successful at it.
He sold his soul for ratings in his little perch now in Fox News. One last thing, though, is I'm sadly going to have to remind you of my prediction over a year and a half ago. The Dems are going to get clocked in this midterm, and then it's Katie by the door. We got to watch out for the constitutional crisis in 24, because as we've seen, they don't give a bleep about truth or anything along that line. They just selling their stuff, and it's despicable.
John,
you guys.
You said it better than I, and thank you for starting off this conversation. And by the way, reaffirming what Marjorie says about Fox News virtually every single day.
Well, it's extremely influential, and it's not just what it says on the show, but what ends up being on Facebook or Joe Rogan or Dan Bongino or these other shows, which again, some of which there was some Christian talk show network that was spreading things about litter boxes too. I mean, and again, I think everybody knows this is not true. Everybody doesn't know it's not true. I mean, I think people buy this kind of stuff, just like they buy the fact the election was stolen. Here's Jackie from Sharon. She says, I feel like I'm living on a different planet. I am so despondent.
Well, so am I. So am I. Chris in Gloucester, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for your call. Hi.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I think the prosecution of Trump is even more important now after the midterms, because I think a lot of this stuff, people aren't not fact checking; they're making things up. It's a distraction from the real damage that Trump has done.
Yeah, but Chris, even though I believe the case has been made that he has committed numerous crimes, and hopefully Merrick Garland, the slowest prosecutor in the history of prosecutors, will get his act together sometime in early 2023, don't you think in some ways that is even going to strengthen Trump's hand with the part of the country that supports him? What's his line about, how does he describe it? Witch hunt. The ultimate witch hunt is the prosecution of the former president of the United States. Again, so I'm saying go for it, but I worry it's just going to cause his sycophants to be even more loyal than they are now. Chris, thank you for the call.
You know, a texter is reminding that This American Life reported on the Columbine situation with the litter boxes. It's all over the place, too, that when they were looking for school districts that actually did have anything to do with any kind of cat litter, it turns out that school district in which Columbine is, and everybody remembers the terrible massacre in Columbine High School in the 90s, that they have active shooter go-to kits for these active shooters in case they're in a lockdown for a long time. And the kits include first aid equipment, and they include candy for children who might be diabetic, who can't get their insulin in time. And they also include litter. In case kids are stuck in a place for like 8 hours, they do have some place to go to the bathroom, but it's got nothing to do with anything to do with LGBTQ rights, and that's what this is about. This is kind of trying to say, oh my God, look at if we extend these rights for gay kids, trans kids, bi kids, whatever, that this is what's going to happen. They're going to dress up as cats and use litter box in the bathroom.
You know, considering the fact that you're into the cat theme to the exclusion of all else, someone texted and said, I hope the GOP will be as offended by seniors having to eat cat food when they kill Social Security. By the way, I'm not one who believes that anybody's going to kill Social Security, but it's an interesting hook you take there.
Lee in Texas, thank you for calling.
Hey, Lee, what's up?
Hi, Marjorie and Jim. Marjorie, I wanted to touch on the kitty litter, but you basically just said it, that it was actually NBC News that discovered this about the kitty litter, and I think it's going on in Texas, too. And it's just very scary that we've accepted that. You know, I listen to moms who tell me, I take a picture of my children every day. So when I get a call, I can show them what they were wearing.
Yeah. Well, you know,
and every kid out there, I mean, they've imagined themselves being in this situation, and we just accept it. And it's very sad that this is where we are.
You are dead right, as always, Lee.
Well, you
Thank
know,
you
Lee,
for your call.
I thought with all this talk about crime, and that's become a big issue in this election, I wish more Democrats would say that crime anywhere is awful, but the kind of crime that is particularly scary to a lot of parents and a lot of children is the crime they may face going to school every day, where they have to have active shooter drills, where they have to prepare for this. And the reason that we have these massacres in schools is because we have done nothing, of course, about preventing acquiring guns with high capacity magazines that enable these horrible shooters to mow down dozens of people in just a couple of minutes.
You know, we got a couple of texts from people who are saying, well, why aren't you praising, Marjorie mentioned them before, people like McConnell and Pence and others who have said the right thing. Here's why. Let's play Glenn Youngkin. Glenn Youngkin is the darling of, let's call them moderates, comparatively speaking, in the Republican Party. Here's what he had to say about the Paul Pelosi beating on Friday at a campaign event.
There's no room for violence anywhere, but we're going to send her back to be with him in California. That's what we're going to go do.
Now, I would argue, Marjorie, tell me if you agree, that if a leader of the Republican Party doesn't go out of his or her way to condemn a comment from a fellow Republican leader like that pathetic statement by Governor Youngkin, then they're complicit. I mean, what you're doing when you're making light of that kind of political violence is you're basically saying, go to it. There should be more DPAPs, DePape was okay. It's a funny situation. Let's do underpants. Let's do jokes about sending Nancy Pelosi back to California. Basically saying, anybody who shares that kind of perspective, just go do it. It's just out of control.
Look at this guy, Rusty Bauer, that testified. He's the guy from
Arizona guy
that testified that he was not going to lie about the election.
Speaker of the House, right? Former Speaker of the House.
On behalf for President Trump. Yeah. Although he said he would vote for President Trump again in 2024, he was called, and he was screened. His house was surrounded. I had a family member who was dying. His daughter was very sick inside the house. They screened about he was a pedophile. They had actually an armored vehicle down the street from his house.
I didn't know that.
With scary people. 60 Minutes reported on this, with scary people in there, and they were calling him a pedophile. So I guess this is just, everybody's a pedophile. Everybody's a groomer. Anything happens, you're somehow cavorting with gay prostitutes. I mean, it's just kind of gone.
And it's funny, and it's all funny,
Yeah.
and the violence is funny.
It's like, they said back in the McCarthy era, who was the senator that said, have you no decency? At long last, have you no decency?
Wasn't it the Secretary of Defense? It may have been the Secretary of Defense.
I don't
I'm not
remember.
sure. Yeah.
But that's what you do. You do kind of wonder. And, McCarthy did say something about Pelosi, Mr. Pelosi, but he's also contributed to the rise of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's another person who's...
And Lauren Boebert and Paul Gosar.
And Taylor Greene, between the anti-Semitism and the litter boxes, which is one of her things too, I mean, they're allowing these people to rise inside the Republican Party.
We got to take a break.
Okay. We're talking about, what are we talking about, Jim? We're talking about...
The demise of democracy as we just sit by.
Yeah, we're talking about the reaction to the hammer attack on Paul Pelosi, this growing crazy rumor that the GOP is spreading, or parts of it anyway, about litter boxes in schools. What do you think is going on here? You listen to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
Covering election 2022.
Embracing Donald Trump doesn't usually pay off in Massachusetts politics, but
1 in 3 voters in Massachusetts supports Donald Trump. People forget that.
The Bristol County Sheriff's race pits longtime Republican incumbent Thomas Hodgson.
The Trump years saw Hodgson become a conservative star.
We are all chosen for this time in history.
Against Democrat Paul Hero.
We get his way or the highway. GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And H&H, the Handel and Haydn Society, performing The Marriage of Figaro, bringing Mozart's greatest comedy to life in a semi-staged performance starring Ying Fang, November 17th and 18th at Symphony Hall, handelandhaydn.org. And Hebrew Senior Life, a Harvard Medical School affiliate empowering seniors to reach their full potential with senior living, healthcare, aging research, and more. You can consider Hebrew Senior Life at allweareforyou.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, and we're talking about political violence in the wake of the beating of Paul Pelosi in his home in San Francisco and its rise, particularly urged on by extremists on the right. There's a great quote someone just texted us from Werner Herzog, who's the great German filmmaker. Dear America, you're waking up as Germany once did to the awareness that 1/3 of your people would kill another third while 1/3 watches. Not too far off, says Norma from North Chelmsford.
Speaking of quotes, it was Boston lawyer Joseph Welch who was a lawyer hired in the McCarthy hearings, and he's the one who said to Joseph McCarthy, have you not done enough? Have you no sense of decency?
You ever seen the video? It's one of the most powerful things ever. It's incredible. 877-301-8097. Let's go to Somerville. Gregory is on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for your call, Gregory.
Hey, Jim and Marjorie, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Fine.
The only point I wanted to make is I think, we have to start figuring out a way to build a bridge to these people who have these different perspectives. I think whether it's the litter box or all that stuff about Nancy Pelosi's husband, I don't think those are really the things that people believe in. I think there's general anxiety about race. I think there's general anxiety about, poverty. And when you have that as the soil, it's like people can then use that, and then you can tell people anything. But I think we have to start building some bridges to this people, or else we're just gonna keep sort of yelling across the aisle all day and not really get anywhere.
Gregory, did you hear Anand Girdadas with us, the journalist last week who wrote a book called The Persuaders? Did you happen to be tuned in then?
I do listen every day, but I did not.
Oh, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying he wrote a book. He's terrific. He wrote a book saying exactly what you say, and he gave a multitude of examples from some high-profile progressive politicians to some on-the-ground political activists. And it's pretty compelling, and again, parrots the line that you're advancing. The problem I have, Gregory, and the reason I feel so hopeless, if you were to say to me, who would be a pretty decent president to not threaten the other side, believe in reaching across the aisle, believing in forgiving lots of horrible sins, an attempt for unity, I would say it's Joe Biden. And the fact that he has been utterly condemned and disregarded and trashed by the same people you and Girdadas think we have to reach out to convinces me that you're right in the abstract, but that it may just be undoable. Is that an unfair perspective, Gregory?
No, it's a fair perspective. I think, though, the reason that, well, I say we, but obviously, well, I don't know about obviously, but I am a Democrat. I think the reason that Joe Biden won is because he, even at the margins, he represented a working class slice. And again, I'm a fan of Barack Obama. I'm a fan of Hillary Clinton, so I'm not dogging them. But
go ahead.
I think Joe Biden represented a slice of that working class that, not all, obviously, but that some of the people could relate to. And
I agree.
I think we've got to relate to. So I don't think he has been a failure. I know sort of the way he presents.
Let me be clear. I didn't mean a failure. I mean, he's done a lot of good legislation. I think he's an honorable person. I just meant his outreach to the people that you and Girdadas say we have to reach out to has been an abject failure. I would argue not his fault, the fault of those who aren't willing to accept the olive branch. So I hope you're right, and it's a fabulous call, Gregory, and I'm glad you made it. I'm just not as hopeful as you seem to be, but thank you for calling, Gregory.
Gregory brought up Obama. I saw Obama on television over the weekend. He was out campaigning for a bunch of people, including Mandela Barnes, the guy out in Wisconsin.
Oh, you're going to
running
mention
against
this great
Ron
line.
Johnson. And he's up there saying, he said, and I'm not going to do it like he did because I don't have his comedic timing and I'm not as good as he is. But in any case, he said, remember we thought it was really weird when they were after my birth certificate? I mean, people thought that was like really nuts. The guy was born in Hawaii. What pregnant mom decides she's going to fly to Africa for the United States to give birth? I mean, remember we thought that was crazy? He said, and look at where we are now. I'm paraphrasing, but you just thought
Didn't
yourself...
he say, Mandela, you got better watch out, right?
He said, Mandela, you better get your birth certificate because Mandela's a black guy. You better get your birth certificate ready just in case. And we did think, remember? I mean, he produced the birth certificate. I mean, Donald Trump
I can't believe he
started
did,
that. He did, and then it wasn't good enough. It wasn't the long form birth certificate or something like that. I mean, Trump stuck to that whole birth certificate thing, insisting that Barack Obama was born in Africa. And everybody kind of thought, or some people anyway, thought that was bizarre. But now we're at making fun of 82-year-olds getting hammered in the head and talking about these crazy things about children dressing up as cats.
You say bizarre. I would say a combination of birtherism and other racism directed at immigrants from that right after he came down the escalator is why his campaign took off. I mean, it was born on those kinds of things, The
Globe was reporting this morning about some refugees and migrants in a hotel, about 100 down in Stoughton, and there were those kind of scary white supremacist guys with the masks on and the khaki pants and the black outside protesting that they were there. Is it Cable or Cabell from Boston? I'm sorry, I didn't get it right.
That's okay. Cabell.
Hey,
sorry.
Cabell, how are you?
Yeah. I'm good. How are you?
Great.
Fine, thank you.
I really appreciate this extremely thoughtful conversation that I really want to kind of circle back to the hopelessness that you all are speaking to and the need for hope in this moment, because these actions are really meant to kind of drive us to that space of we're powerless, there's nothing we can do, this is awful, the hysteria, and really underscore the media and the narrative that's out there when you talk about Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, all of those things out there that are about warriors and people that are fighting for hope. I really want people to grasp the fact that people are suffering. And so while they are lashing out in these absolutely horrific ways, while it does cause deep, deep despair, there are problems that are much bigger that we are going to need to face in the next 10, 20 years. And I just wish that we could just kind of come back to taking stock and what we agree on instead of what we disagree on. I think we've reached this pivotal place, go ahead.
You're saying we should have hope, and now I'm going to try to destroy it right after you said it. I know you, don't I?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You've done wonderful things in politics.
Yes.
By the way, you have. But what is it that what do we agree upon that has survived the polarization of this country in the last handful of years?
Well, I think that we agree upon that suffering disempowers us and that community empowers us. And the more we know each other and the more we're able to see one another and talk across differences, the more we're able to find that.
Well, I agree with the last point. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we can't even agree on foundations of children and family and those, those sorts of fundamental things that make everybody get up every day, I don't know how we go outside.
But let me say one more thing to you, is that even something as basic, your first example is we agree that suffering is a bad thing. And by the way, I hope that everybody believes what you and Gregory say, not what I'm preaching and Marjorie's preaching. But I would say that was it not one Republican voted to extend the child tax credit, which was proven in a year to have the increase in it, to have lifted 40 to 50% of kids in poverty out of poverty, that proved that they were okay with suffering, not just suffering in general, but suffering by poor children. Is that
right?
I mean,
no, I mean, you're absolutely correct. The leaders that we have for the GOP, not all, but the majority of them that get the airtime are not rooted in the foundation of the things that bring people together. That is absolutely true. However, what I would say is that we don't need to look to them to spell out our everyday. We need to look to each other. We need to look to community building, because in the end, that's all you have.
Got it. You're terrific. You're terrific. Thank you. You and Gregory are the rays of hope in this otherwise dark 30 minutes here. Thanks for the call.
But those are great points. But you say to yourself, wouldn't you think we would agree that nobody should be paying hundreds of dollars every month for insulin when they don't have any money?
Yeah.
We can't agree on that. We can't agree on lowering prescription drug prices because politicians, Democrats as well, are so driven by money and lobbyists and all that kind of thing. I mean, we can't agree on health care. We can't agree on guns. Can't agree on climate change.
Do you think people like you and me who are this hopeless, that we ultimately just disappear in a pile of goo? I mean, don't you feel like some days you wake up and you're just going to get so whatever we have become?
Well, I mean, you talked to Michael Curry, NAACP guy, who talks about how, it's a very different experience, I think, for a lot of white people now, because white people have been privileged for a long time in America. If you're black, you've been used to getting the shaft because you've been getting the shaft for so long. So the hopelessness is something that's kind of new to us, and that African Americans have been fighting against a corrupt system for so long that maybe they can be a little bit less bananas than people like us who are not used to this kind of treatment at the hands of the government. You know what I mean?
That's another hopeful sign. We're all, the answer is not just people of color who are suffering, it's everybody. Well, that's a positive
Okay,
kind of thing.
Are we moving on?
We are. We're going to discuss some
on.
parts of this with Lee Pelt and Carol Rose and John King, so please don't go away.
Yeah, we're going to talk about sports now because that's less depressing. We've got some good stories in there.
There are some good stories.
Yes, we're going to talk to Trini Casey. She's up next from NBC Boston. You are listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
More than 100,000 people celebrated Pride in Taiwan's capital this weekend. But as queer and trans people there push for more rights, many worry that the progress they've made could be undone under the influence of Xi Jinping's China.
The threat of China to undermine Taiwan's democracy in which LGBTQ rights can survive.
Taiwan's LGBTQ communities speak out on the world.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and Cure Alzheimer's Fund, which supports foundational scientific research into the causes of Alzheimer's disease, because research is the only path to a cure. Learn more at curealz.org. And Johnson & Wales University, using 5 decades of food and hospitality education to inform expanding academic areas like healthcare and business. You can explore more at jwu.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, as we are almost all Tuesdays and Fridays, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now by Trenny Casey. She's an anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and wearing a fetching Johnny Cash t-shirt. Hello there, Trenny.
Hi, guys. I just, pulled out of my closet today. Felt like I had a little 90s vibe in me.
I love it. I like it very much. So, Trenny Casey, let's get this out of the way. Tom and Giselle are no more.
I knew. I put this right at the top of my
right
story list because I knew Marjorie would want to talk about it.
Right at the top, one of the fastest divorces in America, filed on Friday. I mean, they must have had a very airtight prenup.
Filed and finalized on Friday.
Yeah.
So here's what. Okay, so I dug into this a little bit.
I'm sure you did.
Because I have a friend who is a family attorney, which is just a nice way of saying she handles divorces. And I was like, can you file and finalize that quickly? In Florida, you file and have 20 days. So I'm not sure if it filed, if they quietly filed it and it maybe didn't hit the public record. I don't know what happened, but there should at least be a 20-day waiting period. But it's only 20 days in Florida versus where she practices in Wisconsin. It's a 4-month waiting period. So I was surprised, but it does sound like they had mediation. They went to some sort of family classes to learn how to, co-parent and whatnot. But it sounds to me like Giselle was ready for this to be over because, she's living her best life.
She's living her best life.
And Tom Brady, I assume you both know what movie he took the kids to on the day of the divorce, because I read that somewhere. I don't know.
I tried to look to see. I couldn't. So first Tom Brady on his Sunday off. They played on Thursday Night Football, lost again. Tom Brady's Buccaneers are 3-5.
Yeah,
reeling.
I'm wondering if this divorce is weighing heavily
I think
on
it's
his game.
I do think it's taken a greater toll on him than it has on her, because it sounds to me. Listen, Giselle and I haven't had drinks together in a while, so I'm not exactly sure what's happening with her and Tom, but it seems like she initiated the divorce, that she was fed up, that she sort of spurred all of this. And if you look at Tom, there's a part of me that looks at him and just as a human being feels bad. He's really gaunt. He doesn't look like he's been having a lot of fun on the field.
Well, maybe he should have stayed retired.
Maybe he should have stayed retired, and maybe he would still have a marriage.
Exactly.
He did take the kids on his Sunday off. He took them to volunteer at a food bank, and then they went to see a movie.
Well, this is sexist to say, but excuse me, I have to cough. So
okay, well then I'll talk for a few minutes. Speaking of Tom Brady, I can't believe I'm considering this. This notion that Marjorie said, which is the conventional wisdom, that's why he's suffered on the field. He actually is not doing that poorly on the field. His team is atrocious.
Yeah.
And his numbers are pretty decent. They're not spectacular.
Yeah, he get 325 yards on a touchdown.
That's pretty good for a 45-year-old
guy.
But he's got the team surrounding him is not what it once was. You done choking or not?
No, I've recovered. Thank you.
What do you want to say about Tom Brady and Giselle Bundchen quickly?
I'm just going to say, it's sexist to say, but the wife often organizes the home life and organizes the kids' things and all that. So when there's a divorce, suddenly the husband is kind of adrift a bit, and he's not going to be with us. He's not going to see his children every night. I mean, it's sad.
Well, she had a career that she gave up. He didn't have to give up his. Do you notice that? I assume you did.
Exactly that. So, okay.
Can we go to a upbeat story instead?
I'll say just one thing. You see how tall those kids are going to the movie? I mean, they're almost as tall as he is.
So his oldest, Jack, is, I think at this point, he's got to be a teenager.
15.
He looks just like Tom Brady.
Gaunt?
No, he looks like a young, he's got a great head of hair, very handsome young man. I think Vivian and Benjamin look more like Giselle, but they all are. They're just going to be
Oh my God!
gorgeous
Yeah,
and wonderful.
She's 9 years old. She's She's
Oh yeah, she's like as tall as I am.
Okay, so on an upbeat story locally, Stan Grosfeld did this spectacular photo spread is it today's Boston Globe, isn't
Yes.
it? About Maura Healey, not candidate for governor, but Maura Healey, star basketball player. I knew she was good. I didn't know she was this good.
I didn't know that she was like second all time on the for assists.
Assist list.
Like 350 at Harvard.
Well, also, we looked up this morning, there's an error in the Globe and they corrected it, but still, she in a game against Brown hit 13 three-pointers at Harvard. 13. You know what the record for women NCAA players is? 15. She almost had the record for the number of three-pointers. She had incredible stats when she played Pro Bowl in Austria, I think it was.
Yes.
And by the way,
average like 22 or 23 points per game, 10 assists, like a double-double.
And if you didn't see the photographs, there is a photograph of her crossing the midcourt line when she was a junior or senior at Harvard, dribbling the ball that is so spectacular. It should be on our campaign ads. It's just a really wonderful piece about what she thinks helped get her where she is today,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for, listen, just because you play sports doesn't make you a better leader, obviously, or a harder worker. But, Maura Healey is only 5'4". She had to work really hard to become the basketball player that she's. I mean, some of it is just natural athleticism, but it's certainly not like she's a 6 foot tall, two parents who were, pro basketball. She certainly isn't a Vivian Brady, right? Like,
but did you hear what she did as a kid?
Oh yeah, she would go and just sit and shoot hoops. Like her mom sold after they
her
got divorced,
diamond
her
ring.
diamond wedding ring,
to build
so she could build a half court for
No,
Maura
and
Healey
she's
to
doing
work at it.
fingertip push-ups.
Oh, that's right. So because she knew she didn't have big enough hands and she knew she needed to be able to handle the ball, so she did fingertip push-ups to gain strength in her hands so that she would be a better ball handler.
Can I tell two stories that I've told before, but they're so charming that I think it's worth it with a week to go. And by the way, this says not you vote for whoever you want to vote for, but since Grosfield did the story, one, if you haven't seen the video of Ennis Cantor, now Ennis Freedom, who is 7 feet tall, going to the Attorney General's office when he was with the Celtics 3 or 4 years ago, he doesn't know how to spin a ball on his finger, and she, all 5'4" of her, is teaching him on video how to do it, and he can't do it.
Yeah.
And he was charming, and so was she. And the story that Marjorie, I've told 1,000 times, first time I ever met Maura Healey, I was at NECN. She's running for governor. I had heard, Attorney General, I had heard that she was a star basketball player. I knew nothing about it. So I had a basketball under the counter that she didn't know about. We're on live television. And I said, I heard you were a star basketball player. I heard you can spin a ball on your finger forever. And she said, I can. And I picked up the ball and threw it to her. And she spun the damn ball on her finger for the rest of the interview.
Really?
While we're having a discussion.
It's unbelievable.
We went to commercial break. She continues. She says to me during the break, want me to keep doing this? I said, yeah. We come back from commercial break. She's still doing the damn thing until the interview was over. It was unbelievable. Talk about presence. She was really great. So if you haven't seen the Stan Grosfeld piece in the Globe, it's a terrific piece.
It is. If you're a sports fan, even if you're not a Maura Healey fan, I think it's really interesting to always hear about what people are like away from the environment that we're used to seeing them, especially politics.
Yeah. She talks about the discipline and hard work and that.
He talked to teammates at Harvard, coaches at Harvard, teammates of hers in Austria, and just to sort of get that perspective from other people was really interesting.
Okay, so you covered curling at the U.S. Olympics. At the Olympics a couple of years ago.
When they won the gold.
Yeah, where were they then? Were they in Russia then?
Pyeongchang, Korea.
Okay, so kind of a real mess with the USA curling coach. You can't. I don't understand why people don't smarten up about the sexual abuse of players. I mean, what are they thinking? But you go ahead and tell the story.
So here's what happened. Jeff Plush, who has now resigned as the CEO of USA Curling, worked for the National Women's Soccer League during the time that was then investigated by Sally Yates. So long story short,
former Assistant Attorney General.
Right. Jeff Plush was the person that some of these athletes had gone to and had gone up the chain, and he had seen these complaints of sexual abuse by coaches in the NWSL and had dismissed them, didn't follow up on them. And then when Sally Yates's very damning conclusions came out about the negligence of the National Women's Soccer League, Jeff Plush was still the CEO of USA Curling. And to their credit, a number of current curlers who sit on the diversity, equity, and inclusion team, a number of curling clubs. I saw it because I follow a local curler named Monica Walker who competes. She's on the U.S. national team. She competes out of Broomstones. She kept tweeting or posting things about it on her Instagram. Flush Plush was their hashtag.
You know him, by the way?
I did not know him. And if I did meet him, I don't think I met him when I covered the mixed doubles Olympic qualifying earlier before Beijing. But it was a very grassroots movement to get him out because, and I don't blame these athletes. You know, they're saying, how can we trust this person who didn't do his job with the NWSL to protect the athletes here? And what I didn't know was that there have been issues within USA Curling of different sort of allegations of abuse, whether it be verbal, sexual. Like they have had their own issues within their organization that for all intents and purposes have been handled, but they don't want someone there that's going to set them backwards. We're all trying to move forward, and it finally worked. The pressure from the local, the community curling clubs and the athletes right now, it worked, and he has resigned as CEO, and they have an acting interim CEO right now.
And you know, they did what it becomes such the familiar refrain, moved coaches that were just to different teams, move around to different
What's that
teams.
sound like to you?
The Catholic Church.
Catholic Church.
I mean, it's really instructive. We were talking about this yesterday with the Revs, Irene Monroe, and she was saying, well, celibacy would change things. I don't think celibacy is going to change things at all because it's clear. Married people, straight people, gay people. I mean, it's like there's this aversion to recognizing sexual abuse in schools or in athletics or wherever it happens and acting on it. I don't know why.
Like there's not
but there
celibacy
is.
in sports, that's for sure.
Exactly.
And it just happens in different ways, right? Like I mean, look at why am I forgetting his name? The doctor for Michigan State and the U.S. women's gymnastics team.
Oh, yeah.
The guy that abused like hundreds and hundreds of young women.
Who's in jail for the rest of his life.
Rotting in jail as he should be. You know, he wasn't celibate and he was harming children. I just don't like
Larry Nassar, thank you.
We just have a problem, and I've said this a million times on this show. We have a problem in this country where we put success and outward validation, I would say that in the Catholic Church, athletic success within the U.S. Olympic community or Olympic committee or national teams, or even like local, like college teams, high school teams, all of that matters more. If a coach is good at what he does, or a doctor solves a problem and gets your athlete back out there, we don't care what process they take to get there because all we care about is the end result. So for the Catholic Church, the end result is we're this, pious entity and we have more and more parishioners. And for athletes, athletics, it's we're winning titles. We're the greatest nation. We succeed at the highest level, but you're damaging people. You're ruining lives when you don't listen to kids. And what kind of lesson are we sending to these children when they tell us something? We tell them it. Tell an adult, right? Tell an adult and we'll solve the problem for you. And you don't solve that problem, that is damaging to them for the rest of their lives. When you hear an Allie Raceman talk about what she's been through, a Simone Biles,
those women at that congressional
and how
hearing
it has just damaged them mentally, their entire lives. Like, I don't understand how we still haven't gotten to a point where when it happens locally, I mean, how many times has Bob Hohler written stories recently about abuse, racism, sexism in high school sports in Massachusetts or Rhode Island or Connecticut, and we just see these coaches sort of swept under the rug and moved somewhere else because God forbid we call someone out or at least investigate, like a true investigation to find out if what they're doing is rising to the level of criminality.
One piece of good news, you said sending a message. This a player who I have to admit I never heard of,
No,
Mana Shim,
yeah.
was a pro player who was among those who complained to the leadership of the National Women's Soccer League about abuse. She has just been appointed to lead the U.S. Soccer Task Force on abuse. So someone who knows it intimately, who obviously is not going to pull any punches, is elevated to probably the critical position, which I think is a wonderful outcome.
And I love what she said about it. She's like, obviously, this is not the career trajectory I had envisioned for myself.
But doesn't she say she was born for this?
But she said, if I had to endure this, why can't I help others?
Yeah,
why can't I
that's
take
great.
my trauma
I
and
agree
make
with
sure it doesn't happen again? And if you, I don't know how closely you read through the article, but it's not just going to be people within soccer that are sitting on this committee. There'll be doctors, psychologists, social workers, like experts in the field of abuse to make sure that they are following all the proper protocols so that this does not happen again.
You know, you pointed out to us a wonderful story in the Washington Post about this live golf thing.
Oh my God, wasn't it fascinating?
It's fascinating. And, you know, you were quoting before Welch, the lawyer Welch,
Joseph
who
Welch,
said to McCarthy,
Boston.
have you no shame? I have to say, I know money matters a lot, and we all like to get free money. The fact that these golfers, for whatever it is, it's a lot of money, $100 million, $50 million, are willing to provide cover for this murderous regime, and it's not just Khashoggi, by the way, is unbelievable.
And then have the audacity, and I forget, it's Patrick, I forget what golfer it is. I can't forget his last name. I can picture him in my head. He's like kind of a bigger, I think he's American, but he's like sort of an Irish-American looking guy, like red hair. He's asked in a press conference about the human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia.
Patrick Reed?
Patrick Reed, thank you. He had the audacity to say, well, there's such a big time difference, I haven't had an opportunity to follow the news.
That was pretty good.
It's so unbelievable that you would even think that that's an okay answer.
It's such an awkward time zone. Everything will work out.
Also, by the way, you've only played one tournament in Saudi Arabia. All of the rest of them have been in the United States, one outside of Boston or at Trump's Doral down in Florida. You've played in, European countries. Like, last time I checked, buddy, Twitter, Instagram, the internet works everywhere you go. The one thing I will say, the one thing that gave me hope in this article is the fact that Saudi Arabia has tried to build things before and they've seen it, and then they just, when the project isn't working, it just gets abandoned. So like they had this mega city. In fact, it's like the site of this like King Abdullah economic city, it's called. And they invested, they said 100 million people will live here and it'll be this, the city of the future.
110-mile horizontal
building.
Well, that's what they're trying to build in. Well, they're trying to build that now in Nadam, but they first tried to build
from here
this,
to Provincetown.
They first tried to build this King Abdullah economic city, which was supposed to be Nadam before it was Nadam, and then it just never went anywhere, and only like 4,000 people live there. It's in shambles, and they just abandon it. They cannot get anybody to pay to broadcast, and usually how sports works is you pay the league money. So the networks pay ESPN, NBC, Amazon, Fox. They pay $110 billion to the NFL so that they have the rights to broadcast. We pay the Celtics so that we can broadcast the Celtics. I read in this article that league is they are trying to pay Fox Sports to broadcast because no broadcaster wants anything to do with them. They only got something like 6,000 views on YouTube. No one is watching this.
For the tournament,
no one is
for
buying
these star
into it.
players, yeah.
So there's only so much, like after a while, if you aren't getting a return on your investment, you are going to abandon that investment. I see this thing being short-lived, falling apart, and all of these guys crawling back to the PGA, begging for forgiveness and begging for re-entry.
But it doesn't undo. I mean,
No,
I'm
it doesn't
sure there are
undo
people,
it,
I'm not
but-
reading the text, but I'm sure people are texting and saying, Jim, if you were offered $100 million, tell me what you wouldn't do. I like to think I wouldn't do this. I mean, you really like to think.
It's hard, though. It's life-changing money, right? We're not talking about $1 million or $2 million. We're talking about, for some of these guys who were only making on the PGA Tour $5-10 million, and then they're offered by Live Golf, they're offered $75 million, $100 million. Like, that is hard. I mean, money talks. It's hard. I would love to say, like, I would stand my moral ground if Liv came and asked me to, like, host their studio show for $100. I don't know, Jim, $100 million if they were like, hey, will you toss us some highlights and ask some former golfers some questions for $100 million once a week?
Well,
Even though it's
interesting.
in Saudi Arabia, I can't stand here and be like, I would stand my moral high ground and turn that $100 million down.
You know why I think it could? Because there are people who, unlike Tiger Woods, who's a billionaire, I think, they're non-billionaires. They're just wealthy golfers, no more wealthy than the ones you described a minute ago, who did exactly what you said you're not sure you would do, said no. So there were a ton of them.
They're still making what I make in a year
I know.
for like finishing 57th in a tournament.
Okay,
like,
let's try this.
Such a
Let's try
different
this.
life.
What is one of these guys? I don't mean to belabor this, but I'm obsessed with it and have been since I heard of this Live Golf League, whatever it's called. What do they say to their kid when their kid is not 6, but their kid is 18 and starts to understand the way the world is? Why do we do this? Because I wanted to make sure you had a wonderful life, honey. Is that what they say?
You know that Mercedes you're driving? Somebody got beheaded, but you got a really nice
That's essentially what they got to say.
I know.
It's just gross.
I know.
I love the fact that nobody's watching, by the way, and I love the hope the whole thing collapses.
I haven't watched a single second of it. Like, I will not consume it.
So when they come back crawling to the PGA, if that does indeed happen, will the PGA say fine?
I don't know. That's an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you say, if it was me, if I was running the PGA, I'd say, sure, you can come back, but you got to earn your way back. So you have to go back to the lower levels, and you have to requalify.
I got a better idea. You have to donate your finder's fee of $112 million to the charity of our choice. How about that?
Oh.
You disgorge your ill-gotten gains from Live, and you're welcome back to the PGA.
That's
Isn't that a great word?
It's a great word.
Yeah.
Disgorge. I should disgorge something. What can I disgorge? I'm not sure. I'll think of
we've
something.
disgorged a lot of things in our careers, Marjorie, but luckily there's no time to talk about it right now.
Okay.
Trenny, it's very nice to see you.
I'm just disappointed, Jim, this morning saying
Check out the picture of Maura Healey in the Harvard uniform.
Yeah, it's
dribbling
great.
across
It's a great
midcourt.
picture.
It's a great
piece
photo.
by
And
Stan
vote next
Grosfeld.
Tuesday, no matter who you're voting for. Vote next Tuesday.
Or early right now.
Yeah. Okay. We've been speaking with Trenny Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston. Coming up, President of the Boston Foundation, Lee Pelton, joins us. He is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com. And The Huntington. You can celebrate the legacy of playwright August Wilson and the grand reopening of the beautifully restored Huntington Theater with Joe Turner's Come and Gone, playing now through November 13th. Tickets at huntingtontheater.org.
I'm senior investigative reporter Philip Martin, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Head on Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library. Conservative justices on the Supreme Court are signaling a willingness to overturn decades of precedent on affirmative action in U.S. college admissions. We'll hear from the president of the Boston Foundation and former president of Emerson and Willamette Colleges, Lee Pelton, on what that means for equity in higher ed. We'll also talk with the people behind El Mundo's Latino 30 Under 30, recognizing up-and-coming Latino leaders.
Just 1 week out from the midterm elections, a rise in threats on election workers is creating a shortage of them across the country and right here in Massachusetts. We'll talk with the Massachusetts ACLU Executive Director, Cal Rose, about that and more. Then at CNN's John King, a week before the elections. And in Europe, they're switching to 2-minute showers to save on water. We'll open phone and text lines to ask you if you could do the same for the sake of the planet and your other water-saving showering tips. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. More than 4 years after the mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, that killed 17 people and wounded 17 others at a school, most of them students, the victims' relatives are in court today to confront the convicted gunman, Nicholas Cruz, ahead of formal sentencing. Max Schachter's son Alex was among the 17 killed. He says today is his birthday.
Every November 1st, I will be celebrating my birthday
while you are in prison. And every November 1st, I will be blowing out my birthday candles. And you know what my wish will be? That you suffer a painful, violent death.
Last month, a jury was unable to unanimously agree on recommending the death penalty for Nicholas Cruz. Instead, the young man received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Authorities in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, say water has been completely restored. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports more than 80% of residents in the capital temporarily had been left without running water after yesterday's attacks.
The Ukrainian military says it still knocked down 45 out of the 50 cruise missiles fired across the country. Russia's President Vladimir Putin says the attacks are at least in part in response to an alleged drone strike on Russia's Black Sea fleet off the Crimean Peninsula. He also suspended Russia's participation in a UN-backed deal that guaranteed safe passage for ships carrying grain exports. Western leaders slammed the decision, charging Moscow with weaponizing food. Putin did indicate he could change his mind. In a public appearance, he said, quote, "We are not saying that we are stopping our participation. We are saying that we are pausing it." Franco Ordonez, NPR News, Odessa, Ukraine.
It's election day in Israel, and former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to stage a comeback. In this vote, he's allied with the far right. NPR's Daniel Estrin reports from a polling place in Jerusalem.
Netanyahu is seeking to replace the current centrist Prime Minister Yair Lapid. Netanyahu's partnership with the far right in this election is alienating some right-wing voters like Reuben Rotenberg.
It's too right-wing at the moment.
Critics say Netanyahu wants to return to office to try to escape conviction in his corruption trial. Udi Avni says for the first time he's not voting for Netanyahu.
We don't believe him. He just cares by himself, about his trial. He cares about to be free, and he don't care about anything else.
It's a tight race, and it could take weeks to declare a clear winner. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Jerusalem.
At last check on Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 140 points at 32,598. The Nasdaq has fallen 69 points, and the S&P is down 15 points. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro in Brookline today. Nantucket officials are preparing for another presidential visit. President Joe Biden and his family will be once again celebrating Thanksgiving on the island. Nantucket police confirmed that they've been in touch with the Secret Service for the visit at an undisclosed location. The Nantucket Current reports that the first family stayed in a compound along Nantucket Harbor last year. They are frequent visitors to the island, especially over Thanksgiving. The Secret Service says the Bidens also expect to continue to celebrate Thanksgivings on the island in the future. The 2023 New England International Auto Show, a very popular event that was scheduled for January, has been canceled due to lack of vehicles. Organizers of the popular event, which is held at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center, made the announcement on their website, bostonautoshow.com, and Facebook page. They say that because of lack of inventory, they're unable to produce a show that they can be proud of, and they hope to see everyone in 2024 when supplies, hopefully, rebound. The 2022 New England Auto Show also canceled for very similar reasons. In sports, the Bruins are in Pittsburgh for a game against the Penguins tonight. The World Series, Game 3 tonight. Astros at the Phillies. They are tied at 1 game apiece. And the forecast for this first day of November, cloudy upper 60s today, clear low 50s overnight, sunny near 70 tomorrow, sunny mid-60s on Thursday. It's 64 degrees in Brookline. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Subaru, featuring the 2022 Subaru Forester Wilderness, with 9.2 inches of ground clearance and all-terrain tires for off-road capability. Learn more at Subaru.com/wilderness.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming online at youtube.com/BPR GBH News.
One programming thing, hi Marjorie, is tomorrow we're going to do exactly what we did on Monday on question 1, which is we have leaders, that was of course the millionaire's tax, leaders of both sides of the ballot question, do a little debate, ask some questions, and then you get to call in and make comments and ask questions of either or both of the participants. Tomorrow we're doing question 4, really important question, where the proponents are attempting to repeal the law just passed in the legislature over Governor Baker's veto, which allowed driver's licenses for certain undocumented people. That's question 4, tomorrow, 11 to noon. But first, we're joined now by Lee Pelton. Lee's the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation, whose new housing report card is out documenting impacts of the state's severe housing shortage, offering ideas about how to do with it, and particularly relevant today in his former life, he was the leader of 2 institutions of higher learning. Lee, it's good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of great housing stories to talk to you about, Lee Pelton. But before we get to that, affirmative action may be hanging by a thread. By the way things were looking yesterday in the Supreme Court, I thought the newest Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, had a great riddle, as Eugene Robinson put it in the Washington Post, when he asked whether admitting someone who said he needed to get into the University of North Carolina because his family had been there since before the Civil War, and it would be his 5th generation family to proudly attend UNC. The question was, if it's okay to admit him as a legacy, why is it not okay to someone who says it would be really important for him to get into UNC because years ago he could not have a legacy because African Americans weren't allowed into UNC. Right. And the lawyer basically admitted that the former legacy thing was okay and the latter was not okay. It's troubling times here.
Well, colleges and universities, for the most part, enroll students based on and recruit students based on a whole set of characteristics. You know, whether or not you can throw a football, 60 yards down the field, whether you can dunk a basketball, whether or not you can be part of an orchestra or, some quartet, playing a Bach sonata or something like that. Your geographic location, looking for students who are from rural areas and so on and so forth. So I guess I think what she was saying is how preposterous it seems that, even wrong-headed it seems, that colleges and universities, especially selective universities, can in fact have a whole list of attributes, family income, for instance, a whole list of attributes with respect to who they recruit and they enroll, but they cannot use race, not as a defining feature, but as a single one of several characteristics that should be under consideration. And she's absolutely right. It's starting with Brown in 1954, about every 25 years we face this issue. There was the Bakke case in 1978. Mr. Bakke, who was, I think, in his mid-30s, applied to University of California, I think it was a law school, didn't get in, sued, and Justice Powell said that it is the case that diversity is a compelling interest for colleges and universities and for the nation, as long as they are narrowly tailored. And then in 2003, we had these.
By the way, Bakke was a white guy, for those who don't realize.
Right, I'm sorry.
Yes,
he was, And then we had the 2 cases at the University of Michigan, one Grants versus Lee Bollinger, who's now the president of Columbia, and Grutter versus Bollinger. One was at the undergraduate level, one was at the law school. The justices said that the enrollment plan at admissions plan at the undergraduate level was unacceptable because it had this very mechanistic scale on which they rated students, but that the admissions plan at the law school was acceptable because it was very comprehensive and included a lot of factors, and that race could in fact be considered as one feature in a very, a very holistic admissions process. And Sandra Day O'Connor, who wrote the major opinion, reaffirmed Powell, but she did say this, that someday,
25
years, she would be our hope that we wouldn't have to do that. So we've come to that 25-year mark again. We had the 2019, I think, with University of Texas. And so here we are again, 25 years.
Most recently you ran Emerson, which obviously has a selective admission process. Why does diversity matter in higher education?
Well, because there's a lot of evidence for two reasons. One, there's a lot of evidence to suggest and to show that diversity is a defining feature of colleges and universities. We thrive on diversity of thought, diversity of views, people who come to certain issues from different backgrounds. And as I like to say, you can't have excellence without diversity. It's not possible, and especially in a college and university setting. But I think generally that's true. The other issue that Sandra Day O'Connor pointed to is that we are providing a path to leadership, is what she said, for people to assume these positions of power. And if you may recall, in 2003, not only were there a lot of studies that suggested diversity was necessary and good for thriving universities, but also that it was preparing young people for leadership positions. And in fact, someone famously said, I'm not sure how this will sound at these ears now, but then that we want more Colin Powells in the world.
Yeah.
And during the 2003, there was the military came out in support of these programs, and corporate America came out in full support of these programs. And so they had great approval.
So what happens to, I think the conventional wisdom, which I unfortunately subscribe to, having read a lot about what the oral arguments were yesterday, that affirmative action is about to go the way of, in higher ed, about to go the way of Roe v. Wade when it comes to reproductive freedom. So what happens down the line if that's the determination? What happens at Emerson's and all those kinds of places?
Well, it's going to happen. There will be this reversal. And by the way, I think I should say something that may not be clear. Colleges and universities do not have a legal authority to have quotas. We don't have quotas based on race.
It's allowed to be a consideration.
A consideration, but not a quota. You can't say I'm
right.
going to have 15%
Exactly.
or 16%, or I have this many. You cannot do that. It's just saying that it should be one of many factors to be considered when you admit a student.
Okay, so I want to reframe my question, Lee Pelton. When it can't be anymore, as of June of next year, when this decision comes down, let's go back to those thrilling days of yesteryear, and you're president of Emerson once again. What do you do going forward to achieve the same goals where at least one major tool in your arsenal is removed?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but I suspect colleges and universities are thinking about the answer to the question because they're going to have to. But I suspect that there would be some proxy for, and it'll be some proxy for race around social and economic backgrounds. And
I had a
those
guy
sorts
on
of
with me
things.
last night, Richard Collenberg, who's written books about the topic, and he says exactly that if race were no longer allowed as any consideration, but the socioeconomic class was, that he doesn't use this term, but it's a backdoor way to accomplish the same goal. And not only would you achieve more socioeconomic diversity, you would also, through that lens, achieve the same levels of racial diversity. Do you buy that?
I think so. I think that's likely I think that's likely
The
to
course
happen.
for people to take.
Yeah.
But isn't that one of the things you read about colleges now, that one of the reasons that if you got enough to pay your way through, that's a tick up for you, that if you can fully fund the whole thing, so that's fewer people that colleges have to give scholarships to, that if you can't pay, it hurts you.
I don't think that's true.
You don't think that's true?
No,
Okay.
I don't think that's true. I think at the most selective colleges and universities, as I said, they're trying to create a community that represents America or the world in some respect. And of course there will be, folks who pay the full freight, and there will be others who, at Harvard, if you're family of four,
Yeah.
you're making less than $75,000, your cost is zero.
Right, which is great.
Yeah. So
And the admissions committee doesn't know what your economic capacity
they
is
don't.
when they decide on your admission. or
They
not.
don't. No, I was part of the faculty admissions committee at Harvard, and we were. It was an exhaustive process that looked at students with a variety of characteristics. First individually, and then the entire admissions committee would meet once or twice or three times, and then he would ask faculty to come in and look, and so it was a very comprehensive process. It did no quotas, no sort of mechanistic way of doing this.
Okay.
At all.
Okay.
Can I raise one last thing about this, because it galls me more than anything else about this, and then we can move on to housing. This is directed at both of you, not just Lee Pelton. When it's pretty clear that the most vociferous voice in the Supreme Court against affirmative action for all the years he's been there is a guy who admitted in his autobiography that he never would have gotten into Holy Cross or Yale Law School were it not for affirmative action. This is him admitting it. It's not someone theorizing, namely Clarence Thomas, and then becomes one of the most passionate opponents of affirmative action. What reaction do either of you have to that? Lee, you can start.
Outrage. I mean, that's all I can say. It's remarkable because he was, in fact, where he is because of affirmative action, and he's turned his back on that. And the other thing I will say is this, and this may displease some of your hearers, but that appointment by President Bush, in my view, was one of the most cynical appointments in the history of this nation. To replace Thurgood Marshall with Clarence Thomas was deeply, deeply cynical.
Yeah, he was not up to speed for many, many years, never said a word for many years, and I don't think he's still up to speed. On the other hand, he does have his cross to bear as the Catholics K, because he's got to live with Ginny Thomas.
I knew you'd say that. We're talking to Lee Pelton.
That can't be easy.
President and CEO of the Boston Foundation.
So
By the way, we're going to talk more about this case with the head of this ACLU in about a half an hour, Carol Rose.
So, Lee Pelton, I think there's been massive coverage of our dilemma with housing, the cost of housing, the cost of rent. You guys over at the Boston Foundation just did this big Boston Foundation report card on housing. Give us the highlights.
Well, there are three takeaways, none of which will surprise you. One is that the cost to own a home and the cost to rent a home in Boston is among the highest in the nation. And that has been exacerbated remarkably in the last 2 years, pre-pandemic and after pandemic. The other is that the vacancy, the availability for homes, the availability for rental, to be able to rent an apartment is also low. Again, among the lowest in the nation. And those two phenomenon are working against, particularly, against all the folks who are looking to rent or to buy, but particularly for folks of color. And the other big takeaway is that the state needs to step up, because I think only the state can do it, and create a common kind of universal application and set of data for those who are looking for rental property or home, but especially rental property, because there is a lot of these places still go unspoken for, because you don't know where they are.
Yeah.
And if you're in the system, there are, I should say systems, 6 different systems. You have to fill out a 20-page application for each of these areas, for each place that you want to have. And there should be, like in colleges and universities, a common application for all of them. It should be centralized. And there should be a centralized place where, someone looking to rent a house, especially a subsidized house, would be able to go there and see what all the options are in this, in the state or in your, in your area. So those are the 3 big takeaways.
Can I add one thing to this? And my apologies, I was flipping through the summary, and if you said this, stop me. One of the things, there's certain statistics that stay with you forever. We've talked to you about the fact you're joining with the Federal Reserve and others to relook at the infamous wealth gap data from, I think it was 2015, $250,000 for a white family, $8 for a black family, literally $8, $0 for a Dominican family. But talking about inequity, one of the statistics in the report is the term that your staff uses is cost burden, which means a family that spends more than 30% of their income on rent. Overall, 45% of renters in Greater Boston are, quote, cost burden, which is, think about it, more than 30% of your total income on rent. Black renters, 52%. Latino renters, 53%. Essentially, I know this is obvious, you have no money to live after you've paid your damn rent. It's just unbelievable.
If you and your partner work and you're at about the minimum wage level, and you wanted to rent an apartment in Boston, you are likely going to have to pay more than 50% of your total income just on housing, more than that. And so it's deeply impactful. And
what I thought was a fascinating story? The one in the New York Times that asked about whatever happened to the starter home.
Me too.
And because I think we all remember those little tiny houses like Levittown, big construction after World War II, or they were talking about out in Portland, they have these little tiny houses out there that no one builds anymore. Because of, I guess because people want to have bigger houses, the land cost has gone up so much. But they also talked about the cost of government permitting fees, which is a big deal too. I mentioned Portland, Oregon before, that this guy was talking about there that permits could cost $40,000 to $50,000 from the city or the state to do X, Y, and Z to the house. So I wondered how much of a role the government hassle is in housing.
Well, you bring up a great point. So part of this is around zoning and land use. And, after World War II, there was this notion of, the American dream was to have a house with a picket fence and a backyard.
Right.
And so we still sort of live in the shadow of that, so that there's zoning that doesn't permit smaller homes on smaller plots of land. And when I say that, I'm thinking a lot of suburbs, for instance, where that's not allowed because we want to preserve the character of the place. So that's working against us. And as you say, the permitting costs are expensive. The developers will tell you the land is enormously expensive, so it's very difficult for them to build a 1,400 square foot house. And so some of the solutions to this are we have to reimagine. I could look to places in Europe, I could look to Japan, for instance, reimagine what it means to own a home. So a home, so I think we're going to have to be looking at more multi-family structures in places where they're not they do not exist. And things like that. So it's very complex.
Can I state one statistic from this New York Times piece? In the 1940s, 70% of new houses were 1,400 square feet or smaller. Today, it's only 8%.
Yeah.
This is not my area of expertise, even though I used to be a housing lawyer when I was a kid in the South Bronx. But it seems to me that just like Charlie Baker got the legislature, which is on a 5-month recess, I should say, to pass a law
favorite theme.
changing the majority that's needed for certain zoning changes locally, it seems to me that you could decide on one plot of land on a state level to overrule the notion that only one house can be built on that land, allow, if it's X number of square feet, up to 4 houses, up to 3 houses, and then it wouldn't guarantee it, but make it easier. But in light of the fact, Lee Pelton, that this show is probably the most depressing show in America, can we talk about some good news? I believe are you involved in this thing with the city in East Boston, this $47 million
this is a great story.
We are, in fact.
Can you tell people what's going on here? Because it sounds pretty terrific to me.
Well, we're working with the city to develop some affordable housing in East Boston. It's a multi-million-dollar project that's receiving some funding from the city, and I believe some funding from the state. And the Boston Foundation has played a leadership role in bringing this all about. And this is particularly important as we think about the ways in which our communities are rapidly changing. And so people who used to be able to live in East Boston can no longer live there because of all the, the upscale apartments and housing that exists there. So this is a way of preserving that community and providing a sense of developing community through housing projects.
Is there any reason other than money, which right now most governments are pretty flush in because of the federal money? Is there any reason what you and the city did in East Boston can't be replicated elsewhere?
I think it can be replicated. Yeah, absolutely, it can be. I hope it will be. That's the whole idea, is that it could be replicated elsewhere.
They purchased 36 apartment buildings, 114 units. That's a lot of units. This story from Boston.com says 12 million from the city, 9 million for the American Rescue Plan, 2 million from the CARES Act, 1 million in inclusionary development funds. I don't even know what that means. Yeah. But it does sound like it could be replicated, and 114 units. It's a lot of units.
Right, and I think our mayor wants to use this as a model of what we can in fact do. Recently she made a $380 million commitment for affordable housing, exactly like this. And she also made a commitment to reduce the permitting time, which takes forever, so that you can get these affordable houses, in the pipeline. I think she's also talking about ways we can make amendments to the zoning and land use so that we could develop more family housing. And by the way, transportation comes into play here, right? Because if you live in affordable housing, but I think we call this upzoning, they're best placed near a public transportation.
That's Baker's
stop.
deal that Healy has endorsed as well, by the way.
Yeah, you have to do that. Yeah, so and
there's a lot of
the
pushback.
Governor,
a lot of pushback.
Of course,
to that.
there's a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
And I should say that that the state has been very proactive in this regard as well.
Well, with one exception, if I may. I know it's the tiredest subject, but why not bring it up again, Jim? Did I mention the legislature's on a 5-month vacation? And while they're on a 5-month vacation, even though Governor Baker told us last Thursday that he is totally convinced that the legislature will pass the economic development bill, among the multitude of things that are in there, almost all of which are good and important.
Yep.
I think it's $4 billion. There's $400 million
That's
for
correct.
affordable housing,
Yep.
which is on the back burner because these guys have more important things to do than their jobs. Yeah. In any case.
That's outrageous, too. I mean, that's really...
You mean the 5-month thing?
Yeah, and, holding up this $400 million that you're talking about, I don't understand it. I don't know where their priorities are. I mean, you could...
You made my day just now, Lee
Okay.
Pelton. I want
Well,
you to
House
know.
Speaker Marino back in the summer said we couldn't change anything because the
They
House
made
members had
vacation
vacation
plans.
plans, so they couldn't change those vacation plans. You might say maybe you couldn't change a week or two in August, but it's now November, and maybe they could have worked their way back. And everybody kept saying, "Oh, well, they can come back in a formal session and pass things. They have to do it unanimously, but they could still pass things." But we're still waiting for them to come back informally and even discuss anything. So it is pretty bad.
Remember when I said to Governor Baker, I don't want to get you involved in this, Lee Pelton, but to Marjorie, when I said to Governor Baker the other day, how great is it going to be after January 5th when you don't have to pretend to be nice to these legislators anymore? It is totally true. He defends this 5-month thing for a variety of historical reasons. Do you think Charlie Baker thinks it's a good idea that the legislature be on a 5-month hiatus? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Hey,
either.
Lee Pelton, we always like a little advanced tease, if you don't mind. Thursday, what day is it?
Yeah, the
Tuesday.
climate
Thursday,
thing.
the Boston Foundation releasing some climate report you've done. Can you give us at least a little taste of what we're going to see?
Well, I think it will be predictable in some respects, looking at where we can ameliorate, the climate crisis that we're all in. But I'll let the report speak for itself.
No, come on, you speak for it for a couple of seconds.
Can you give us an
just a
idea
taste.
how long before we're going to be underwater? That's what I want to know. Is it 10 years, 20
I don't know,
years, 30 years?
something like that. No,
That's on page 4 of the report.
Yeah,
I'll wait
we're
for the
built on
report to come out.
landfill right
I'll
here,
wait
right here.
for the report to come
It's
out.
a wonder we're not sinking already here at the
So,
Boston Public
okay,
Library.
so you're not going to tell us any of the content. This is a Greater Boston kind of deal. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
That's what it's
exactly.
looking at? Okay, fine.
Yeah, I'll see you there.
Okay. I hate that. Hey, Lee Pelton, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
We
very,
really
very much for
appreciate it.
coming.
By the way, the housing report, I didn't even tell you this.
What's that, Jim?
2 of his colleagues were on TV with me the other night, and they handed
they were
me
great.
at the end.
They were
not
great.
only were great, but they handed me a copy of the report, which I actually read in bed the other night. And if you think you know everything about affordable housing, you don't. You should really get a copy, I'm sure, if you go to your website, tbf.org. Is that where it is?
Yeah, it's a remarkable report.
Great.
And if you don't want to read that, there's also a link to a forum that we had, video. It's about a minute and
great.
about an hour and 25 minutes, and that you can do that as
It's
well.
great. It's really important you check it out, either the video or the report itself. Lee, thanks.
Thank you very much, Lee Pelton. We've been speaking with Lee Pelton, who is the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation. Thank you very much for coming in. Up next, we're going to get a Latino roundtable with the creator of El Mundo's 30 Under 30, now in its 5th year. We're going to have actually one of the 30 Under 30 people here. One of the people highlighted on this list, one of the people is a baseball player, third baseman at the Red Sox. Anyway, you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
Some people call them flyover states, especially around election time. The middle of the country doesn't get a lot of attention from the media, but it often shapes our collective future. And Jeremy Hobson is listening to people who identify with being in the middle. Middle of the country, the middle of complex debates, the uncertain middle of the moment. Join Jeremy Hobson for The Middle, a new national live call-in show. Tomorrow night at 9 on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Delta Dental of Massachusetts. Good oral health is known to protect you from heart disease, depression, and more. You can discover the connection between oral and overall health at expressyourhealthma.org. And Fallon Health, care and coverage to meet the unique and changing needs of all they serve. Care for your struggles, challenges, and triumphs. That's the kind of care Fallon Health believes in.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Elvis Hochul Lara, the creator of El Mundo's 30 Under 30, now in its 5th year. He's nodding at me, saying, basically, you were close on my name. I'll do better as we go along.
That was pretty good.
Thank you. And Delmarina Lopez is an attorney and the first Afro-Latina to be elected to the Chicopee City Council. She's one of the under 30s highlighted in this year's list. Elvis, Delmarina, it's great to meet you. Well, have we met before or not?
Yes.
It's great to see you again, and congratulations on your election. It's great to meet you.
Thank you. Great to meet you. Thank you for having me.
So thank you both for coming in. Elvis, let's start with you. Tell us what 30 Under 30 is.
Yeah, so the Latino 30 Under 30 is a program that we launched back in 2016 to really just highlight the incredible Latino talent that exists here in Boston. I think when folks think of Boston, they don't really think of the diversity that exists here. But Boston and Massachusetts as a whole is one of the most diverse states in the country. We have the 14th largest Latino population by state in the country, and we have folks that are doing amazing things, both homegrown here in Massachusetts, but also people that come from across the country, from across Latin America, that are drawn by the colleges, universities, and the companies that we have here, and are just doing amazing things.
You know, Elvis, one other statistic that I learned a few months ago that I know you know that people should be aware of, close to 100% of the population growth in Boston in the last couple of decades, I think it's like 97 or 98%, is the Latino population in our city. And I don't think most people know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Latino community has been crucial to the success and the resurgence of Boston and urban areas in greater Boston over the last 10, 20 years or so. I know my family came here from Guatemala back in 1984 when things were much different. And so I've seen the change in the demographics, and not just in Boston, but in cities like Waltham, where I grew up, where, you know, folks may not think that there is a large Latino community, or that there has been a shift in the demographics.
So why'd you pick the woman to your left as part of the 30 Under 30? Why'd she make the list?
Well, I think you all will see pretty soon just how impressive Delmarina is. But Delmarina, I think, is just the quintessential Latino 30 Under 30 honoree who is from Massachusetts and is really just changing the face of Latino leadership, of leadership as a whole in Massachusetts. And I'm just thrilled to have her on the list this year.
Well, Delmarina, I was surprised to know that 21% of the people in Chicopee, where you're representing now, are Hispanic, but you are the first Latina woman to be elected to the council there. Tell us the deal.
Actually, we don't tout this one, but I'm actually the first person of color ever elected to any municipal seat in the city of Chicopee. So, yeah. And so, like, we focus on being Latina.
I would be booing, not applauding. What took so long? I mean,
exactly.
Jesus.
So it's like part of it, and this is part of what I feel, the responsibility that I feel as a Latina elected, is part of it is pride that finally we have representation. But also in 2022, it's absurd that we are at this place, that I'm still the only. We're about to have a state rep who is also a woman, a Latina, and that's very exciting. But it is a shame that for so many years, especially in a city that has such a growing population of Latinos, a growth that is very evident. It's not just numbers. You can see it. You can see it in the graduating classes from our schools. You can see it in who works in the city, who owns homes in the city. So the growth is evident, but the representation has just never been there.
Why?
So I think part of it is Chicopee. Some people tout that like there's like a little boys club, an old boys club in Chicopee.
I've never heard of that before.
I sure have them a bunch of times. And so part of that is that power is maintained by the same group of people. So even if we look at demographics of women, not just people of color, there's been less than a dozen women period on the Chicopee Council. And so you think about then what does that mean? Who has held power for this long? It's only been white men. And so that's the reality of power across a lot of organizations, not just municipal government. It's a reality of power across Massachusetts. And that's what we're trying to change, because if our population dynamics are changing, the demographics are changing, then why are the people who are making the decisions not changing?
Counselor, when were you elected?
I was elected last election.
Okay, we have interviewed on this show a former city councilor in Everett, Gurley Adrian. I don't know if you know her, who also broke a racial barrier in Everett and was treated incredibly disrespectfully by her colleagues even after she was elected. What kind of reception have you gotten breaking barriers like you did out there in Chicopee?
Yeah, I mean, some of the councilors are very receptive. They knew that this was necessary. I also, I went into an election against an incumbent that was, had made some comments that folks felt were really inappropriate. And so it was a little bit, I walked into a pile of dirt that I didn't realize I was walking into. And when I realized the impact that had on folks, that they were not just choosing to support and, embrace me, but they were also, in a sense, renouncing the comments of the other counselor. Some of them have been very nice to me, have embraced me, but there are also comments that happen all the time. And I can recall at the last meeting we just had, someone made a comment about like, oh, I'm just going to resign today and leave the women to do this because there's 2 women on the council now.
And you said fine, right?
And I was just like, okay.
Get out of here.
I literally said to him, I hope you realize your mic is on. And so, like, those kind of things happen all the time. There's this one counselor in particular who likes to go against anything that I say. And it's like nonsensical because what I'm saying makes sense and you're just refuting it with fake news. And so it's like, some of them are great, some of them are receptive. Even the ones who go against me, I don't even think it's intentional about me being a person of color per se. It's just that they're so used to not having a person of color in a position to be able to make decisions that they don't know what to do with it now.
By the way, I know 30 under 30. How old are you?
I'm 26.
26. So you're not long out of law school.
No, I graduated in 2020. I was one of the COVID grads.
Oh, you're one of the COVID grads. Okay, so that means you couldn't walk across the stage?
It does. It means I also got sworn in an office, not in the courtroom. Yeah, it was a different experience.
So Elvis, why does this 30 under 30 thing matter? What's the goal? Obviously, it means a lot to the individuals involved, but what's the larger value that caused you to do this?
Yeah, I think it's important for the state as a whole to recognize the outstanding Latino leaders that we have in the Commonwealth. I think it's not something just for the Latino community to celebrate, it's something for the entire community to celebrate. And I think as you look at the changing demographics of Massachusetts, the success of Massachusetts is going to depend on the success of the Latino community. So I think folks need to understand the type of leaders that we have here, but also focus on a lot of the other issues that the Latino community in Massachusetts face.
Didn't Marcela Garcia write in the Globe maybe 2 weeks ago, I think we talked to her about it, I'm not sure, about the rising number of Latinos who are likely to win elections this election cycle on Beacon Hill? So there are about to be some dramatic changes there as well. And we should say, in addition to the counselor, there's somebody standing over here who I met years ago, Gabby Taveras, former Miss Massachusetts, I should say, who was a prior 30 under 30, correct?
Yeah, Gabby has been instrumental to the Latino 30 under 30, not just from when she was elected as one of the honorees, but in this year in helping put the event together. And she's actually going to be hosting the event on November 5th. So we're really excited to have her and really kind of come full circle from honoring her back in 2018 to now she's on stage and will be helping to honor Del Marina and our other 29 honorees.
Can we hear it for the former Miss Massachusetts, Gabby Taveras, former 30 under 30?
I joke all the time about how you can see where the political power has been in Boston for many years until recently, because if you go to South Boston, which was now it's much more affluent, but for a long time, working class family, mostly Irish, a lot of Irish immigrants, but the political power in Boston was Irish. So there is more open space, and there are more parks, and there are 2 projects over there on the water. You're looking out at the beautiful Boston Harbor and stuff, and it just shows how much it mattered that the South Boston was represented by powerful politicians. So I'm thinking that in terms of what you could be doing in Chicopee, because we hear a lot about, Latinos lack connection. They don't have that roadmap. They're not, one of our colleagues, Alexi Cohen, just did a great piece about this, the connections, the mentorship and all that. So talk about that in terms of what you see for yourself in Chicopee.
Yeah, I mean, not just Chicopee. I think the beauty of where Chicopee is situated in Western Mass as a whole is that all of the neighboring cities, we work together. And so some of the mentorship I've received has been doing work in the Springfield community, not just the Chicopee community. And some of my mentors, even now in like the political sphere, they are not just in Chicopee, because especially as the only Latina in Chicopee, I'm not going to find anyone who's Latinx who can mentor me right in Chicopee. So we work together. Western Mass as a whole, I think the power is shifting. We have senators now who are a senator who is representing Chicopee as well, who is Latino. We have Carlos Gonzalez who's out of Springfield. We're now going to have Shirley Arriaga, which is a woman of color in Chicopee, representing the state rep seat. So I think that part of mentorship is also understanding what you need in mentorship, and mentorship is really important. I think that's part of what Latino 30 under 30 aims to do, is create this network so that we can depend on each other and lift each other up, so that when we want to, have more open spaces or work on a particular issue, you have other people that you can rely on and that can help you out.
We're talking to Elvis Hochul Lara. Yes?
It's getting better and better.
I think it's every time we're going to get there. And relatively newly elected Chicopee City Councilor Del Marina Lopez. Could you tell us some of the other 30 under 30s? Yeah, I want you to know that Marjorie Egan says that she's reading down the list of the 30 before. She says there's some Red Sox guy on this list. Is he any good?
Third baseman.
Well, he's the best player on the Red Sox. Who are some of the other 30 under 30s? The other 29.
Rafael Devers.
Correct. Yeah.
Rafael Devers. Yeah. So I mean, I think throughout the 5 years, and this year is really special because we are celebrating our 5th anniversary of this. We've seen Latino representation from across industries and across facets. So we've had Rafael Devers this year. In the past, we've had Al Horford from the Boston Celtics. We have Carlos Hill from the New England Revolution, who was the MVP of the MLS. We've had folks that are lead dancers at Boston Ballet that have come from Latin America. So I think we've had an incredible array of folks, and Del Marina just kind of continues a tradition of young elected officials. So we've had Andy Vargas, state representative from Haverhill. We've had Judith Garcia out of Chelsea. We have this year, in addition to Del Marina, we have Manny Cruz out of Salem, who is the state representative-elect there. So we have seen folks from just a wide array of areas, and we really just love to celebrate that Latinos are making an impact and a contribution in this state across all facets that I think most people outside of the Latino community haven't yet caught on to.
How did this happen? The whole 30 under 30 thing.
Yeah, so back in 2015, 2016, I was working with El Mundo Boston, and I was very involved in the Latino community. I was going across the state and just seeing unbelievable talent. And what I was noticing is that general market media was not really highlighting these folks. So other 40 under 40 lists or whatever it may be, we weren't seeing Latino names and faces. So rather than complain about it, what we said is we're going to honor our folks and we're going to do it our way. So we focused on Latino 30 under 30 because the median age of the Latino community is 28 years old.
Wow.
So we wanted to,
in the
really
state?
Nationwide and in the state.
28 is the median age?
It is the median age.
That is stunning.
So we wanted to really highlight the youth of the community and the vibrancy and the fact that this is the future of Massachusetts. It's the future of America. So that's how it kind of came about back in 2016. And fortunately, the reception from the Latino community, from sponsors in Boston, has just been fantastic, and I'm just really excited to be celebrating 5 years of this.
By the way, we don't want to take any luster away from what you're doing, but there's strong rumors that Marjorie and I are both about to be named to 80 under 80. So we're just hoping so that we don't age out of it too quickly. So on this show, Counselor, let's step back from Chicopee for a minute, about how democracy is like hanging by a thread in this country. As an elected official and an activist, obviously, how worried are you about what's going on in America?
I mean, there are parts of me that are worried, and parts of me were more worried with our last president. I was a little bit more worried then.
He may be our next president. That's part of the problem.
That's part of the problem. But I think that there is hope, and part of the hope is the Latinx vote. Part of the hope is the Black vote. Part of the hope is get out the vote efforts that are happening across the state, across the nation. There are activists that focus solely on that. And I have faith in them. I have faith that they're going to mobilize the community so that the community can go out and make their voice count.
But in some of the southwestern states, I'm sure you've read this, at least the credible news reports I read say the Latino vote is split. There are a decent percentage of Latinos who plan to vote for people who are election deniers. And by the way, I think that, to me, is the one absolute disqualifier. How do you explain, assuming that the reporting is legit, and I think it is, how do you explain that?
I think that there are a lot of pieces that go into why Latinos vote the way they vote. Particularly, like if we look at the Trump election, we realize that a lot of Latinos voted for Trump, and we think, how could they have? When we saw so much misogyny, we saw so much, discrimination, and how people came from the woodworks and showed racism like they had never shown before. And we realize that part of that also has to do with culture and religion, that it's a sad reality. But I think instead of focusing on those folks, on the folks that are going to vote that way just because that's how they're influenced, the important thing is to mobilize the folks who are not even voting, who may not have those influences, because oftentimes if you have those influences, you are voting because that's part of the influence. So if we focus on the folks who are not registered or who have not voted for X number of elections, and we mobilize them and also educate them on what their vote means, how important their vote is, and what exactly is on the line, then I think we solve the problem.
You know, I'm sure when you were running, going to meet people, it was. Well, what was that like when people saw you at the door?
It was, honestly, for me, it was really fun.
Old, woman of color.
For me, it was fun. I've done other campaigns before. I've worked on other campaigns. I've managed other campaigns. So for me, this was...
when you were 12? I mean, when were you doing this?
Basically, while I was an undergrad, I managed a mayoral campaign in Holyoke for a candidate who was a Latino candidate. I also volunteered for Elizabeth Warren's campaign and Markey's campaign.
Didn't you work for Deval Patrick as an intern in Western Mass?
Yeah. When I was 12.
Literally.
That's
you
right.
were 16, right?
I was 16.
I told you all would see why Del Marina is on this
That's right.
list.
Prodigy
So go ahead.
politician.
And I also worked for Secretary Galvin for a number of years.
You did.
So this part of it was not new to me.
Yeah.
But what was really exciting was when I walked into the race, there were 2 other people and the incumbent. So there were 4 of us. By the time it was time to turn in signatures, the incumbent had already said he wasn't running because I was running. And then one person didn't turn in any signatures and one person didn't turn in all their signatures. So I was the only person on the primary ballot on a race that was supposed to be 4 people.
Oh my gosh.
So for me, that changed everything because the strategy changes. Now I don't have to just knock on doors of voters. I can knock on any door I want. So my ward is the most diverse ward in the city. It's the most Latino ward. And it's also one of the most low-income wards because that is where we have like the projects and the village and areas that oftentimes those doors don't get knocked on because those doors are not often voters, because we know that folks who are usually low income or who are minority are part of the people who don't vote. So I got to just knock on those doors. And I knocked on other doors too, but I didn't have to think about, am I knocking on a door that's going to get me a vote? I literally walked around with voter registration forms and knocked. And that changed how I was able to engage with people. People were like, oh, I don't vote, I don't trust in this. And I was like, well, let's talk about that. And I would sit outside on a lawn chair that they would offer me and talk to a group of them, and more people would like migrate towards me in the middle of the projects. And I would pass out voter registration forms. And it didn't matter to me whether they actually went and voted. I wanted them to, but it didn't matter whether I got that vote. It mattered that they were now going to engage in democracy. That mattered more.
Wow.
I think I'd vote for her if she knocked on my door, don't you think?
I tell you.
So Elvis, tell us, so the deal, voting is over for this year, right? It ended in September. But people can, tell us the procedure for if you have someone you want to nominate for
Correct.
30 under 30.
So we will open up the nomination process again next year. And so we have a panel of judges who select the final 30 honorees. This year we had over 400 nominations.
Wow.
So, the folks who are on this list are really top notch. And I think for, folks who are not familiar with the Latino community, this is a great opportunity to kind of find out who's next, like who is going to be at the forefront of the Latino community in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. But for this year, all of our honorees will be released on our website, latino30under30.com on Thursday. You will be able to see a video profile on Del Marina and the other folks.
What's the website again? Say it again.
latino30under30.com.
Latino30under30.com.
You'll be able to read a written profile on them as well. That will all be in English. Of course, the Latino community is bilingual, bicultural. We do have a lot of folks that still consume their media in print, in Spanish. So we will have a special edition in El Mundo newspaper on Thursday as well. And this will all culminate with a major event at Royale Boston this Saturday, November 5th at 5:30, from 5:30 to 10, where this will be the 5th year where we get over 1,500 people down there to celebrate our Latino heroes from across the Commonwealth. And we're just really excited to have everybody out. And we want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. And it's not just for Latino folks. It's not just for people who are under 30 years old. This really is an opportunity to celebrate leadership in Massachusetts and Boston. And we want to encourage folks to come out and celebrate with us.
I want you to know, if we were not out of time, Elvis, we'd spend about 10 minutes talking about the best blue suit I've ever seen in my life.
It is. No,
it is
you know what we're going to talk
insane.
about? It's 12:54. We've been moaning and groaning here since 11 o'clock this morning. Now I'm talking
That's
to these
a very
two people,
fine point.
and you've
Feel a little
restored
better.
my faith in democracy because you guys are both so enthusiastic
It's
about
great to see you both.
what's going on. Thank you very much
Congratulations
for
to you
coming
and the
in.
other 29. It's
We've
really
been
good to
speaking
have
with
you.
Elvis Jocolara, the creator of El Mundo's 30 Under 30, now in its 5th year, and Del Marina Lopez, an attorney and the first Afro-Latina to be elected to the Chicopee City Council. She's one of the under 30 under 30s highlighted this year's list. Congratulations again, and thank you both for coming in.
Great to see you.
Up next, we're going to talk to the Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Carol Rose joins us to discuss threats to election workers and threats to affirmative action. We'll be back to, well, things are in bad shape. But anyway, we had this nice little interim here. Thank you very much. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, Governor Charlie Baker is asking the federal government for more support in getting resources to migrants who have made their way to Massachusetts. The state's commercial food waste ban is taking effect. We'll learn what that means. And Worcester voters are weighing whether to adopt the Community Preservation Act. Those stories in all the day's news, starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and New England Dental Group, committed to helping you stop hiding your smile by offering a variety of dental implant solutions to replace missing teeth in one of their 8 locations. Learn more at newenglanddentalgroup.com. And Boston Ballet, presenting As Anticipated with 3 contemporary works by celebrated choreographer William Forsythe, including a world premiere. On stage November 3rd to the 13th. Tickets at bostonballet.org.
Trusted. Local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by the Executive Director of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, Carol Rose. And the other night at the Mass Humanities Awards, we met her wildly talented musician son, which was a thrill. Hi, Carol.
Hi, it's great to be here. And the Acoustic Nomads were thrilled to get to play the tune.
Yeah, they were terrific.
They can really play. Acoustic Nomads, they were great.
They were great. Congratulations on a very talented young son there. So back to the doom and gloom here with Carol Rose. that
brief respite,
of enthusiasm and hope for the future. Chief Justice John Roberts has now put a temporary hold on handing over former President Trump's tax returns to the congressional committee that's been investigating those. Richie Neal from Springfield has been trying to get those tax records for quite some time. What does this mean in terms of the timing of investigating?
Exactly. So they've been trying to get these records since 2019, and so initially they were trying all sorts of ways to stop it by going to the court and getting a delay until I think November 10th. That means that if the Dems lose control of the House, chances are he's not going to have to ever turn over his records, and just kind of reinforces this notion that somehow there's one set of laws for Donald Trump and another set of laws for everybody else in America. And so it's just really undemocratic, and it's really discouraging, and it really undermines the credibility of the U.S. Supreme Court yet again.
But I was kind of surprised because while we know that they're very conservative and affirmative action is hanging in the balance and Roe was overturned and all that, they haven't been all that solicitous of the president's requests on any number of things.
Well, they have been in terms of delay. They haven't been in terms of ultimately ruling on the merits. But I just think that at this point what they're trying to do is to give him the time to see if the voters of America go out and decide to vote for democracy and vote to retain control of the House and the Senate both. That's why it's so important that all of our listeners get out and vote and exercise their franchise, like your previous guest just said.
So you think that they're trying to help him escape accountability here?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Just to be incredibly clear, if the Republicans take over the House, the Republican chair will no longer be Richie Neal, a Democrat, and obviously he or she will decide we don't need the records. You know what's incredible about this that maybe isn't incredible to you, but I think it's important for listeners. Just like in the affirmative action case, which we're about to discuss with you in a minute, we talked to Lee Pelton about, not only did every lower court rule in favor of continuing the history of race being allowed to be a factor in college admissions.
Yep.
I believe every judge in every court that considered it ruled that way, but not the Supreme Court. Here again, lower courts have ruled that Donald Trump needs to turn this over.
Right.
Fellow judges, these are not advocates or left-wing radicals in either case, yet all of the judges in the affirmative action cases were apparently wrong, and all of the judges in turning over Trump's tax records were apparently wrong, according to this Supreme Court.
Right. I mean, frankly, it just shows yet again that we have this sort of ideological extremist takeover of the U.S. Supreme Court. And anybody who says that the Supreme Court shouldn't make policy, that's nonsense. They're obviously making policy. It's a policy the ACLU doesn't agree with, but that's what they're doing. This isn't about calling balls and strikes or being independent. This is about actually using the court to make policy, and it's incredibly dangerous to our democracy.
So let me just ask you one more question. I'm surprised because obviously, like I said, they're conservatives, but I don't think that they think democracy should just be run over in the way that former President Trump has
I don't
fought.
think they're conservatives. I think they're radicals.
You think
I
they're
think
radical?
conservatives don't want change. Conservatives believe in stare decisis and in precedent of law. These are not conservatives, Marjorie. I just think they're actually ideologues.
Right, but I mean, the election wasn't true, and he's really off. So you think they're on his team, and those?
I think they're on his team.
Okay.
So can we talk about affirmative action for a minute? Maybe we'll play a little from one of our favorite justices, Samuel Alito Jr. This is during the argument yesterday concerning affirmative action, obviously, asking about the term, quote, underrepresented minority, and claiming that giving an advantage to one group will necessarily, he says, disadvantage another. Here's Justice Alito.
Your brief repeatedly refers to certain students as members of underrepresented minorities, right? What does that mean? Why is that significant? What is your response to the simple argument that college admissions are a zero-sum game? And if you give a plus to a person who is falls within the category of underrepresented minority, but not to somebody else, you are disadvantaging the latter student.
What do you say if you're the lawyer in front of the justices yesterday? What do you say to Alito?
So I think there are two things. First, I dispute. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. First of all, as a matter of standing, we don't know that the plaintiffs in that case that weren't admitted into Harvard or University of North Carolina, that they would have gotten in. So it's not a zero-sum game. We don't know that they would have gotten in or not. I'm not even sure they should be allowed to be in court because I'm not sure they have standing to prove that. But secondly, I think it ignores the fact that when you have a student body that is fully representative of our country, that doesn't just help the people who are from racial minorities. It helps all of us because we all have to learn to navigate in a diverse world. And so that notion that it's trading off one student against another is wrong both as a matter of law, but it's also wrong as a matter of public policy.
Well, the thing, we mentioned this before when we were talking to Lee Pelton, the Ketanji Brown Jackson point, her so-called riddle, she basically posited to the attorney saying, well, so it's okay to admit a legacy because they've been 5 generations at the UNC. It's okay to give that person a plus, to use Alito's word, but it's not okay to consider someone who couldn't get into UNC for all those generations because African Americans are barred from UNC.
Right.
I mean,
and the lawyer acknowledged the answer was yes.
Well, as Eugene Robinson put in his column in the Washington Post, well, the lawyer, he hemmed and he hawed, and he finally had to admit that was true. So I don't get that. How can you say one thing is okay and this other thing is not? Or as Lee Pelton said, being a great basketball player is okay and race consideration is not, or whatever.
Squash. Things
being
like
a great cellist, whatever it is.
Right, exactly. And so that's why it's so important that we recognize that we're not dealing with we're not in a post-racial society. We had chattel slavery in this country for 400 years. I mean, the notion that somehow that's all going to be rectified now since the last ruling in 2003 when they said we hope it'll be done in 25 years. No, it's going to take centuries. We have to at least give it another 400 years to recognize it. Or we could look at things like the racial wealth gap or the racial housing gap or all these other kinds of gaps. If you want to come up with some external factors, we can do that. But all of the external factors on racial wealth gap, just as an example, show that we still have a problem of discrimination in this country. And the very fact that, black people weren't even eligible for the GI Bill. My dad served in World War II, and it was because he was served in the war. He got on the GI Bill. He was able to get educated, first in his family to go to college.
I thought they were eligible, but in practice it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
That is what
right.
it was,
Yeah. And so I just think it's really important that we understand the structural history of racism in this country. And the court seems to be oblivious to it or turning a blind eye to it. And in so doing, they're pretending that we're in a post-racial world when, in fact, we're not.
One of the things that worries me about this decision is not only the decision itself, but it's sort of analogous to what Thomas said in a concurring opinion in Dobbs overruling Roe v. Wade, is, hey, this isn't in the Constitution, so we'll dump the right to reproductive freedom. There are a lot of other rights, in quote, that are not in the Constitution. We should get to them next. I'm assuming that a court that decides by 5-4 or 6-3 that race cannot even be a factor, which is all this says, as Lee Pelton says, not a quota, not the factor, a factor in consideration of admissions. If they say that's unconstitutional, I assume that any other government program that has any racial preference, no matter what history it's built upon, housing, employment, whatever it is, there's no reason to think that they're not at risk either.
That's right, because the reasoning of the court is the same. So in the Dobbs decision, it's very clear that, and Thomas made it clear, he was explicit, that next is going to come going after people based on their sexual orientation or based on their gender identity. They're going to go after all of those substantive due process rights about personal integrity, personal physical autonomy. And here we're going to see the same thing. We're going to see the extension of a bad ruling that will end up creating more opportunities for racial discrimination in housing and employment and in all the other kind of places in our society that, in fact, both the 14th Amendment and Title VI were adopted to address. I mean, what I loved was when Justice Jackson said, the 14th Amendment was passed to overcome slavery, not to ignore it or to be race neutral or race blind. So it's a rereading of history which says this court is extremist. This court is ideologically extreme. They're not a neutral court, and they are doing policy making from the highest court, and that's incredibly damaging to both the integrity of the court and to our democracy.
Well, also speaking of it seems to me that if I'm one of those 6 justices and I watch the likely outcome of the elections people started voting, but the final outcomes on Tuesday, if it is true, in fact, that a party that supports virtually everything that we're saying this court is doing wins control of the House, the message it seems to send, in my perspective, to the court is, go for it, boys and girls. This is essentially the American people are willing to live with you cutting back on rights that in some cases they've had for half a century. Don't you think? Unfortunately, I know you're a much more positive person than we. No, I'm serious, than we are. Yeah. But that's what that is one of the messages that is likely to be sent next Wednesday.
Why it's so important. That's right, and that's why. I mean, authoritarianism is easier. It's a simpler message. People tend to like it. That's why, even Germany, right? The Nazis rose to power through a democratic, quote unquote, election. So I think it's tremendously important that we realize that we in Massachusetts have such an important role to play as a safe haven, as a beacon of liberty, right? Historically, we've been a beacon of liberty. And I think right now, this is our historic moment in our lifetimes for all of us to stand up and to protect abortion rights, to protect affirmative action, to protect all of these things to the extent that we can in the state law. It's like a flame that we have to hold because we may be entering into some very dark times. And this is a moment where Massachusetts, I think, has an incredibly important role to play historically in this country and actually in the world.
It was nice to hear somewhere this morning on the news our station that people aren't as depressed about the state of Massachusetts as they are about the state of the rest of the country. So I thought that was a little bit. I thought that was a little bit heartening.
And we have agency to do something about it here. I mean, that's why it's so important that we get involved and we get engaged and people become civically engaged. I've said this before, democracy is a muscle, and the more we exercise it, the stronger it gets. So I'm really dedicated to doing more and more of this kind of democratic work with our voter education, with your Know Your Sheriff's campaign, and what a difference a DA makes. And listening to the guests you just had, it's wonderful to hear them.
I know.
They are great, and they are the future. They are the future.
So one of the things you are doing, I didn't quite get this. I know the ACLU in a lot of parts of the country is training people to work on Election Day. Now, we're reading every day, including in the Globe here, about the number of people who are willing to continue their tenure as election workers, either officials who get paid or volunteers, or, well, not
Right.
volunteers, but working only on election day, is dropping precipitously. What do you say to a person who says, Jane Doe, who's my friend, has been an election worker for 30
Right.
years, when she did something that John Doe didn't like, she got a death threat
Right.
on her voicemail, which, by the way, is happening everywhere, not
Right.
just in Arizona.
It's here, too.
I had the state rep from Cape Cod, whose great offense was he worked to help the 49 migrants who were brought to this state thanks to DeSantis. And he admitted on my show, even though he said he shouldn't have brought it up, he's gotten death threats. And again, his sin is he worked to
help
ensure
someone.
that
Right.
these 40-some people were treated humanely. What do you say to a potential election worker when he or she says they're death threats if these people don't like what I say?
Right. Well, I mean, it's really hard, but we have to do it because democracy requires sacrifice. And, you know, the ACLU of Georgia, they trained up in 2020, 16% of the poll workers were ACLU trained poll
That's
workers.
so?
Yeah.
Wow.
And now this year, they're going to try to double that up to 35%. And here in Massachusetts, we work with other groups, with Lawyers for Civil Rights and Common Cause and, the Voting Rights Coalition. We're training poll workers here in Massachusetts. It's tremendously important that people engage in our democracy and that we continue to do that. And when those death threats come, we need to stand with those people and come together in defense of them and make sure the police protect them. It's, again, this is the kind of thing we have to talk about it. We have to name it. We have to be engaged in our school boards and in our town meetings across it. The more we engage, the stronger and more protected we are. And it's hard work. You know, somebody just told me the great line, democracy is about meetings, right? It's about going to meetings, which is like, sounds mundane, but it's actually really powerful and true because it means all of us can do something about it. All of us can get engaged.
How much do poll workers make?
Yeah, I don't know offhand.
Yeah, I think that they should get a big rate.
That's a
rate
great
increase.
idea. I love that idea.
I don't think that's enough. You know, how about the case that was it a federal court judge, I believe, in the last few days ruled that it was perfectly fine for armed, quote, observers of drop boxes outside in Arizona. These people are coming armed with masks and ballistic vests.
Yeah, it's
and
incredibly
a court
scary.
said that's not a violation of somebody's right to vote. I mean, can you get any more intimidated than that?
It's incredibly intimidating. And
Well, they've
it
arrested
is
people.
discouraging, but there have to be, we need to find ways to document it. We have to find ways to educate people. There's safety in numbers. We have to find ways to all come out together and stand together for what we believe in. And it's really hard. And my counterparts, there's an ACLU office in all 50 states.
Yeah.
My counterparts in places like Georgia and Florida and Texas and Arizona, they have such hard work to do, which is why I'm really glad to say we at the ACLU of Massachusetts, we split the money that we raise here with those other places so that we're actually raising funds here through our ACLU membership, and we send half of it down to the South, to the states in the South and across the country as a way to make sure that the work we do here in Massachusetts has impact here, but also resonates throughout the country.
So the sheriff in Texas has said that the 49 victims, the migrants that came here from San Antonio, are crime victims.
Yeah.
What's going on with this case?
So it's a really interesting situation now. So the ACLU is representing a number of these people who were shipped here by Ron DeSantis from Texas, even though he's from Florida, and we're helping them to obtain what's called a U visa. And a U visa is given to someone who's been a victim of a crime who then cooperates in helping to solve the crime. And it protects them and it gives them asylum on a temporary basis. So we've been working and with other attorneys, not just the ACLU, there's a whole bunch of immigration attorneys working on this. And they got this sheriff down in Texas to announce that, in fact, they were victims of a crime, namely the crime of being shipped across strait without their consent. In other words, Ron DeSantis committed a crime. And in so doing, we're hoping that they'll be then certified to get these U visas, and we can begin again to talk about the systemic ways that we can protect people's rights, while at the same time pushing for comprehensive immigration reform, so we begin to address the problem of migrants coming across the border.
Yeah, comprehensive immigration reform is going to be happening any day. So let me
Keep
ask
hope
you
alive,
something. I don't know
Jim.
how
Keep
much
hope alive.
I never heard of this U visa thing until I was reading some of your stuff this morning. We had a couple of people with us, actually two of our colleagues, Sarah Betancourt and Jennifer McKim,
Yes.
who are working on this labor trafficking series on GBH, which is really
Great,
terrific and unearthed stuff that I don't know about you, Marjorie. I knew nothing.
Neither
I
did
knew about
I.
sex trafficking. I didn't know
They
about
did
labor
great
trafficking.
work, great work.
Women working 16-hour days, 6 days a week for no pay. locked in the basement on their
Right.
seventh
They're
day
pushed
where they
into the
can't go out.
shadows.
But
Right.
the only good news out of this is when the few women, not few, I shouldn't say few, when those women who were able to escape, they were eligible for T visas. T as in, I don't know what it stands for, but T visa like in Tom. That's the good news. The bad news is the administrative delay in getting it, according to a lawyer at BU who's working on this, according to Jen and Sarah, is immense. And the other and the denial rate is high. And the other problem is, while you're waiting for approval, if you've been labor trafficked and have no money, and essentially depending on the goodwill of strangers to keep you afloat and alive, you can't work. You're not allowed to work until the T visa is granted. Is the U visa any more expedited so that people who've been screwed like these, so it isn't?
No, it takes a long time, like 4 years. It
4
takes,
years?
It takes a really long time to get these visas, which is why we have to protect both these individual people, but then we also have to go and look at the systemic problems, which is why the ACLU is working with people like Mayorkas and other people in the administration to try to push forward.
He's Homeland Security.
And so we're trying to find ways that we can address the upstream causes of the suffering, as well as trying to prevent the suffering from the individual people.
You know what is incredible? That these people came here from other countries. They did not get paid anything or almost nothing. Now they can't work for 4 years. What are they supposed to do in the interim period? You know, it's just, I mean...
It's a really important question. And what are we going to do as a society, as a community, to make sure that the people who are our neighbors, who in our midst, are going to be able to live and thrive and be a part of our contributing members of our community? And that's why I just want to say it's so important that people vote yes on question 4, because this will keep our roads safe.
I thought you don't take positions on elections.
No, we don't on candidates.
Oh, you do on ballot
questions? We do on ballot questions, yeah. And it's really important. And this is a bill that would actually make our roads safer.
It's a law, not a bill.
I'm sorry, it's a law. It's a ballot initiative. So by voting yes, it would make sure that all people can get a driver's license if they're qualified to vote, irrespective of their immigration status. And this is one where the civil rights groups, the immigrant rights groups, and law enforcement are on the same side, which just shows what a common sense bill, law it really is.
Karen, maybe you could help us out with question 2 and question 3 about the dentist and the liquor stores.
I'm good on 2. It's 3 I need some help.
Yeah, that's the liquor stores, right?
That's liquor stores.
Yeah,
Can we go back and
I don't know how anybody's expected to vote on these things. You've done entire shows on them. You still don't know what they mean.
Well, it's your opinion that I don't know.
Oh, I asked you, Jim, off the record, and you said you didn't know.
Well, now you've told everybody, so I guess it's not off the record, is
but
it?
I mean, that is the ridiculousness of some of these ballot questions.
No, and the legislature
don't understand
excuse me, if the legislature did its job and didn't take 5 month vacations, you wouldn't have to go to the ballot. Now, let me get back to immigration for a second. We used to discuss this with Ali Noorani from the National Immigration Forum before he left for other pastures. He was terrific.
He was terrific.
He would mention how the chambers of commerce are probably the strongest pro-immigration entities because they don't have workers and they need workers to do what they're doing. They own Congress. I mean, I think it's fair to say that business, even in democratic times, and we have a democratic Congress, obviously by it's 50-50 in the Senate and very narrow in the House, but I think it's fair to say a lot of Democrats are owned by these business interests too.
Right.
If the most powerful lobbying groups in the country, business leaders, want comprehensive immigration reform and they can't get it, seriously, what is there that's going to make it ever happen, and why can't they get it?
Well, I think the reason they can't get it, do you remember even Marco Rubio down in Florida was pushing for comprehensive immigration reform? He was the gang of it, part of the gang of it. It really should be a bipartisan move because it is good for business. It's good for universities. It's good for retail. It's good for hotels.
Yeah.
It's good for everybody, right, to have some kind of a reform so that we can regularize these migration patterns because they're going to continue. We let the capital flows go across borders and then we criminalize the people who follow the capital flow. So it doesn't make any sense. What's happened in this country is that ideologues like Steve Bannon and Miller and these other people have captured, through social media and otherwise, have really captured the ideological racism in this country. I think racism is a very powerful, fear-based meme or message that's getting out there. And so again, it comes back to us to undo that danger and to continue to speak against it. And, hope is a political act. I do want to leave you all with a sense of hope. That's Gloria Steinem says that. It's the political act, and we act to create hope. I don't think we act out of hope. I think we act because we need to create it. And so that's what keeps me going and getting up and doing this work day in and day out.
We just got a very important text from Marianne from Fall River. She said she's been a poll worker since 2016. Her rate of pay is $15 an hour. It should be twice that, Marianne.
Yes, it
She
should.
reports at 6:15 in the morning, doesn't leave until 8:39 at night. We do get a lunch and dinner break. And Marianne says, it has been my honor to work at the polls these past years and hopefully for many years to come.
Marianne is a patriot.
Marianne is a
for her.
patriot. You deserve a raise, Marianne.
Yes, you do.
Absolutely.
We'll work on
Carol
it.
Rose, nice to see you as
Nice
always.
to be
We
here.
Carol
appreciate
Rose,
your
thank
time.
you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
We've been speaking with Carol Rose. She's the Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union. In just a minute, we're going to be talking to John King from CNN about the election, what's going to be happening next week, and about litter boxes and bathrooms. Jim is appalled that I keep talking about, but I can't believe anybody's talking about this. Never mind believes it. John King from CNN, he's next. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
The quality local news and thoughtful conversations you hear each day on GBH are made possible by listener contributions. When you become a GBH member or leader, you join a community of supporters who share a passion for lifelong learning. As patrons of the Champions or Beacon Circles, you also enjoy benefits that bring you even closer to the heart of GBH's mission to educate, entertain, and inspire. Learn more about the new ways you can make an impact online at gbh.org/growtogether.
Support for our programs comes from you and Syngenics, a precision medicine company using autoantibody biomarkers for early diagnostics, patient stratification, and response prediction. Learn more at syngenics.com. And Hebrew Senior Life, a Harvard Medical School affiliate empowering seniors to reach their full potential through senior living, healthcare, aging research, and more. You can consider Hebrew Senior Life at allweareforyou.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now by John King with 1 week to go, CNN's chief national correspondent and host of Inside Politics, weekdays at noon. Hey there, John.
1 week, one exciting week to go, and then probably a week or two of counting after that.
Well, yeah, it could be a long time for counting, as you point out, John, because a lot of these races are really, really close. I'm just looking at some poll numbers this morning. They got a tie in Michigan, where Governor Whitmer is fighting to hold on to her job. That race is tied. In New York, which has historically been a very Democratic state, Lee Zeldin, I believe that's his first name, is closing in on Kathy Hochul, the Democratic governor, trying to hold on to her race. This is hugely tight almost everywhere, or awful lot of places.
There's a lot of volatility. There's also, Jim and Marjorie, as you all know, there's a big debate about polls and how much we should trust them, and we can have that conversation if you want. But I do think that, when you look at a Lee Zeldin race or a Tudor Dixon race in Michigan, is there some fundamental change in the campaign dynamic, or is it, voters in both parties who maybe they're mad about politics, maybe they're mad about one thing or another, and they sit in the undecided column for a while, and then they come home at the end. That's where you got to dig deep, right? Is that what, so a lot of races will get closer at the end. Sometimes it's just, people coming home, if you will, to their political party of choice. Sometimes it's momentum, and you got to go deep into the weeds to try to figure out which is which.
Does it matter at all politically, this terrible incident with Nancy Pelosi's husband, the actual breaking into somebody's house, hitting on the head with a hammer when he's 82 years old, before we get to the fact that a lot of people haven't even called it out as disgraceful? Does that resonate with people that maybe think, gee, things have gotten totally out of hand here?
So you can make that argument if I just disassociate myself from what I do for a living. Just years in covering politics, you could see a Republican saying, see, I told you so, crime is a problem, especially in big Democratic-run cities. You could also, if you're a Democrat, say, see, I told you so. Republicans will not be serious about anything, and some of them are making jokes about this. Some of them are blaming Democratic policies for this. So I think you could see it different ways. I do think back to being CNN's John King and a guy who's covered campaigns for going on almost 40 years now, I do think it is jarring to see a tweet from Marjorie Taylor Greene today saying, if Paul Pelosi only believed in the Second Amendment, he could have shot this guy. And this would not have played out the way it played out. And questioning, there are legitimate questions. He's from Canada, the alleged assailant, about his immigration status. Did he overstay a visa? And that's Democrats' fault because they're not tough on immigration. Carrie Lake tried to tell a joke about it. She's the Republican candidate for governor of Arizona last night. And then she went on Fox and said, I won't be censored, when she was criticized for telling the joke about it. Because she says you can't talk about Nancy Pelosi or Paul Pelosi or COVID or anything. And I would say, no, that's not true, actually. This is America. You can talk about anything you want. That's the great gift of America. But we should, and voters should, expect their candidates to tell the truth. She says the election was stolen. It was not. She has said other things that are simply factually not true. I think we have a great gift of the First Amendment, and we should never try to take it away from anybody, whether we disagree with them or agree with them or whatever. But in the public sphere, it would be nice if we could get back to actually having fact-based, policy-based arguments, not conspiracy arguments.
A very clever tweet that I will steal is, in addition to Lake's comment and getting laughter and the alleged moderate Governor Youngkin with that horrible comment about we're going to send her back to California, and the absolutely despicable Don Jr. with the retweeting the image of the underpants and the hammer. Elon Musk now runs a pretty big operation, and for 3 hours till he took it down, he was promoting a conspiracy theory from a not very credible newspaper in Santa Monica about what really happened there. The clever line on Twitter, which I wish I could take credit for, is in the old days, and these days, Musk is going to have to ban himself, which is true. I mean, I would argue that he is encouraging violence, which is one of the reasons that Donald Trump is no longer on the venue. How worried is an old hand like you, who's been doing this forever, in a time when violence almost political violence, and we talked about election workers earlier in the show, becomes almost part of this is what we do kind of thing, John King?
It shouldn't be part of what we do, but it is. People in our business received threats after the last election and had to have security details outside their homes, including the person you're talking to now, who has a child.
Really?
And you have to explain those things to your children. There were threats against CNN. I'm not aware of any specifically against me, but there were threats against CNN, and there were some threats against my great colleague, who is the mother of my 11-year-old son, and others. It was worse for other people, but you had to have some security detail. I don't want to make a big deal about that because, you also have members of Congress who get death threats, whether it's Fred Upton in Michigan because they stand up to Donald Trump, Adam Kinzinger because he's on the January 6th committee, or he stands up to Donald Trump. So the threats are bipartisan and they are unfortunate. The governor of New Hampshire said today, understandably so, what about the Steve Scalise shooting? What about the threats on Justice Kavanaugh? He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right that this violence is on both sides. But
who made a joke about Scalise and Kavanaugh?
No. Chris Sununu was saying that we should take. Governor Sununu was saying we should take what happened to Paul Pelosi very, very seriously. But then he was trying to say that it's on both sides, and he mentioned the Kavanaugh and he mentioned the Scalise. He's absolutely right. But Jim, the numbers don't lie. I'm not excusing any violence, but political violence from the right is disproportionately much higher than political violence from the left. All violence is reprehensible. All violence is wrong. But you have in this moment too much whataboutism or too much both sides-ism. Again, that's not excusing any violence or any threats against anybody. And yes, political violence and coarse political rhetoric is something everybody should think about, regardless of your politics. But the numbers, look at the think tanks, the people who study this, look at the Justice Department statistics, are just indisputable. Violence and threats of violence from the right are much, much, much higher than violence and threats of violence from the left. So this is a problem for everybody, but it's much more of an issue on one side of the spectrum right now. And if you read the affidavit in the Pelosi case, the alleged assailant said he wanted to have Nancy Pelosi. He wanted to talk to her. If she lied to him, he posts COVID conspiracies. He posts links to Mike Lindell, election is stolen. So his definition of the truth is not our definition of the truth. If she lied to him, he wanted to break her kneecaps so that she would have to go before the other Democrats in a wheelchair. So they would understand the consequences of their lies. I'm putting that in air quotes for those listening on the radio, not watching on the internet. So this is a deranged person, but where does this information come from? That's the conversation everybody has to have, but especially in this case, especially Republicans who say the election is a lie or that Anthony Fauci is somehow a traitor or things like that. Words have consequences when people are on the edge, period.
You know what does surprise me, though, and maybe I'm mistaken, but that Kari Lake could get away with making a joke about an 82-year-old man who was hit in the head with a hammer in his own home, and that people, there isn't just almost a visceral repulsion.
People laughed.
They laughed. Yeah.
This is a legacy of I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and still get elected president. This is a legacy of the Access Hollywood tape, where if you take then businessman Donald Trump at his words, he was guilty of felony sexual assault. He says he was joking. It was locker room talk. Those are things that were once not said in American politics. They were from the fringe in American politics, and the fringe has been invited into the party. I don't know the solution. When you see how Mitch McConnell reacted to the Paul Pelosi assault, watch how he reacted to it. Watch how more House Republicans reacted to it. You see the divide. We talk about this divide on many different things in the Republican Party, but you see it again here. Serious, policy-minded, conservative Republicans, maybe people listening disagree with them on the issues, but they're public servants who come to it with a serious policy perspective. They see this as horrific, full stop. It's horrible, full stop. There's no place for this stuff in our politics and in our country, full stop, as opposed to trying to make jokes about it or rationalize it and say, well, gee, it's just both sides. You can make the case. It's a hard one a week from an election. Republicans have every right to say, we want to send Nancy Pelosi home. But in this moment, you should think carefully about how you say that. Why is that too much to ask for?
You know, I have to say, John, the one place I think I disagree with you is I heard what people like McConnell said and some other Republican leaders who did say the right thing. I guess, believe they have to be held to a higher standard. And when someone who is sadly prominent, like this son of a former president, or a rising star governor in Virginia, makes comments that are inappropriate, you should be able to find a way without trashing them to say, well, I have great respect for Governor Youngkin, or if you want to lie and say you have great respect for Donald Trump Jr., criticize the behavior so that it's clear to the average person sitting at home that this is not acceptable to anybody of goodwill in this society. And that's a threshold, I guess, because they're still scared of Don Jr.'s father, that they won't cross, which is, to me,
I think it's somewhat broader than that. And let's have this conversation 2 weeks after the election and see if it changes in any way. I do think, a week now before the election, and when the incident happened in San Francisco, the horrific assault, 10 days or 11 days before the election, I do think some of those Republicans who perhaps might be inclined to be even more forceful and repeat it, if necessary, and name names, which is the point you're making there, or at least name examples if you don't want to go to the name names part. I think they understand that they think the year is breaking for Republicans in the end here, and they do not want to use a Star Wars metaphor, any disruption in the Force. I don't mean to be joking. That's not said as a joke. It's
no,
just
I understand.
To find the right language for it. I think that's what they think. I get your point that that maybe that shouldn't matter. Maybe the principle should come before the power. Maybe the being in power, the principle should come before any politics. It's I could go on and on and on.
No, I hear you.
You see the age we live in.
Just one last thing about this. We were talking with listeners this morning about this, with Don Bolduc and several other Republicans, some of them running for governor. In Minnesota, somebody else is in Colorado. There are a bunch of state lawmakers in places like Tennessee talking about this absolutely unfounded, ridiculous story about litter boxes in high schools because kids are supposedly dressing up as cats and furries and running down and using the litter boxes in the bathroom. It's, a part of this, look what's going to happen if we give recognition and respect to LGBT members of the community. Don Bolduc in New Hampshire is still talking about this. He's running neck and neck with Maggie Hassan. You say to yourself, we were debating this before, Jim thinks it's nobody believes, it's just a bunch of baloney. I don't know if anybody believes it or not, but a bunch of people are talking about something that is absolutely based on nothing but a crazy rumor, never verified.
And so it's an internet meme. It was meant as a joke. And it has become, so you take that, you take stolen elections, you take QAnon theories. And so people who live in these silos, who hear misinformation, whether it's something that's just on the surface, ridiculous, like litter boxes, kitty litter boxes in our schools, all the way up to, as I said, this suspect in San Francisco posting videos to Mike Lindell, the pillow guy. He's an expert on math, obviously, and elections stolen. And so do people believe these conspiracies, or is this just the world they live in so they don't deal with anything else? Are they in an alternate reality? I think you'd have a whole spectrum of that. But for a man whose title is general, who served his country admirably, to be repeating this is just mind-boggling. He's an intelligent person. B, he has a staff who should disabuse him of these notions if, for whatever reason, he initially thought they were true. That's a danger in our times. Honest Americans will sometimes see things that look legitimate and start to believe them. What I always say is, but you have a supercomputer in your pocket, right? Your smartphone is now a supercomputer. You can fact-check this yourself. You can go to sources that you trust and realize, oh, duh, I got duped there. So anyone who makes a mistake for 24, 48 hours, we should have grace for. That's possible in this crazy age we live in, of the explosion of misinformation, some of it which looks very much like a professional news organization, if you will. But there should be a clock on this too, for just common sense. And so it's inexcusable. So is that that voters don't care? Is it that voters find it funny? Is it that voters are so tribal that they're going to vote D or they're going to vote R, regardless of the candidate's character, the candidate's paying attention to real news versus fake conspiracy? I think that's one of the questions. I'm not sure. We will not definitively answer it a week from today, but we're going to get a lot of new information on that, because you can go state to state and find different candidates, from election denial to other conspiracy theories that, again, when I started in this business, would have been disqualifying in the primaries. Just, nope, sorry, not welcome here. We don't do the fringe in our party, whether it's a Democrat or Republicans. We're going to see.
Yeah, John, one last question, which admittedly is speculative, but I think you know the personalities. Is it unreasonable to believe that election-denying Republicans who lose their elections are going to say their elections were stolen next week, too? Are we going to have more of that just broken down on a more local level?
So I think we're going to talk next Tuesday, I hope, while people are voting, right? And we're going to respect that, and we're going to encourage everybody to vote. And then the Tuesday after that, Jim, I'm going to guess that we're going to spend some time on this. That will there be people who refuse to accept the results? We know that it is in the bloodstream now, deep in the bloodstream. It's not one or two Republicans. It's Republicans running for governor. It's Republicans running for senator. It's a bunch of Republicans running for House. It's a lot of Republicans running for Secretary of State, the very people who are supposed to count the votes and protect the integrity of our elections. And it's Republicans running for everything down ballot, from dog catcher all the way up. And so I suspect, not next Tuesday, because we won't know yet, but I suspect the Tuesday after that. By next Tuesday, you might have some people saying that if they think they're behind in the polls. The Donald Trump line, the only fair election is the one I win. So I suspect that we will, for the next several weeks, be having this conversation. And, again, we'll look at all the results. We'll see if there's any evidence of any fraud or any problems out there. But we know there were none in 2020. I don't suspect there will be any widespread fraud in 2022. But I do suspect we will be having this conversation, yes.
Get some extra sleep for the next 6 days, John. You got a big day coming up.
Espresso, baby.
Espresso.
Yeah,
John,
it is the greatest, isn't it? It's fantastic. I've got mine right here. Thank you very much,
Be well,
John
King. Talk to you soon.
We've been speaking with CNN's John King. He's chief national correspondent for CNN and the host of Inside Politics, which you can catch every weekday at noon. We always are grateful to talk to John King.
And the best vote counter in America.
The magic wall. The magic wall. I saw him at the magic wall last night. You're going to see a lot of magic wall for the next few days, and maybe for many days after the election. Anyway, coming up, Europeans are taking 2-minute showers, ostensibly to save the climate. Would you limit your morning shower to just 120 seconds? Would you have a joint shower with somebody else in your home? Or would you do selective washing, only cleaning your bits, pits, and soles? That is next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
On Monday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a pair of cases that may radically transform the landscape of American higher education. NYU law professor Melissa Murray discusses what the court heard, how we got here, and what the future holds for affirmative action. I'm Melissa Harris Perry, and that's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Cure Alzheimer's Fund, which supports foundational scientific research into the causes of Alzheimer's disease, because research is the only path to a cure. Learn more at curealz.org. And the law firm of Davis Malm, knowing the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com. That's DAVISMALM.com. Davis Malm. Lean, agile, strategic.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, as we are virtually every Tuesday and Friday. So we go from the demise of democracy to the potential demise of the shower. You know, as Europeans brace for a winter without Russian gas, some countries are recommending changes to people's daily routines to conserve. Slovakia is urging people to limit showers to 2 minutes. Finland's government is urging families and friends to take saunas together. So we're going to open the lines for the remaining time here to whether or not you draw the line on personal responsibility for conserving energy to protect our planet. We can all do more, like cut down on air travel, eat less meat, but how about a 2-minute shower? That's where I draw the line. Marjorie, what'd you talk about again?
Pits, bits, and souls.
Pits, bits, and souls.
That's
you
correct.
figured out. If you don't have enough time to do all them, what do you do? 877-301-8970. Call or text. It's basically how much the extended shower matters in your life. And I have to say, speaking for myself, which is the only person I am able to speak for, it is a huge part of the calming that I attempt to do to myself as I start the day, Marjorie. So I will not be buying into the 2-minute shower.
You're doing a lot of damage to your microbiome, Jim. Whatever that is, I'm not really sure. We're taking all the showers. Yeah, it's not just the planet, not just the water shortage, it's the microbiome. You're supposed to be going to the pits, bits, and souls, and it saves you a lot of time, saves a lot of water.
What are the bits?
The bits that are more soil than others. Let's put it that way.
Well, I understand souls, I understand pits, but maybe you'll describe bits.
The parts of your body that might get dirtier and you're worried about.
Okay.
You can save time. They have all these beauty products now that do these things. They have these body cleaning products, shower sheets, and flash bath, no rinse body cleaner, and dry shampoo. You probably don't worry that much about dry shampoo.
Dry shampoo. There was a report the other day that it is cancer causing.
That was the hair straightener.
No, it was dry shampoo.
Dry shampoo.
I think. Can you check that so I'm not giving horrible?
I thought it was the hair.
Dry shampoo, Zoe says.
Oh my God! All dry shampoos?
No, in any case. Okay, the number's 877. We're not going to talk about dry shampoo. Well, Marjorie is.
I'm not going to last long.
Now, the only question for a lot of listeners, why I want to talk about whether or not you're willing to sacrifice a long morning shower for the good of the planet. Marjorie is trying to figure out a way in the next 15 minutes to work in kitty litter in schools into the conversation, because she sure as hell worked it in every other conversation.
You don't get the kitty litter.
I do get it. I get it.
I mean, we're now at a point where people are talking about spaceships landing in their backyard, the flying saucers in the backyard. We're saying, okay, that's no problem. You can be the governor. You think it's spaceships in the backyard, no problem at all.
Can you answer my question before we get to the calls? How important is a long shower? The long shower to me, listening to music or news in the morning, is huge. It is totally huge. And by the way, what I'm willing to do is if, as they're suggesting, where is this, in Finland? If a couple of neighbors want to join me, that is perfectly fine.
It's fine. It's fine. I could.
Which is fine? A short shower?
No, a shower is fine, but I could live without it. Saves you a lot of time. Sponge baths is what we used to call them before it got switched to
sponge baths is
pits,
for like
bits,
really
and souls.
old people.
No, sponge bath is what you do if you suddenly have to go. No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
It's for if you have to suddenly go somewhere, you don't have time for a whole shower, and especially with women with your hair, and your hair gets wet, you have to dry your hair or style your hair. You just want to do a quick little. Can
I respectfully disagree with you by saying the following?
Pits, bits, and soul thing.
The only people I know
with your flash bath, no rinse body.
The only people I know willing to take sponge baths fall into two categories. You know this to be true: either really old people or other people who have peed in the kitty litter. Those are the only two people I'm aware of. Let's go to Colin in Marblehead. You're first on Boston Public Radio. Hey there, Colin.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
I don't think you're going to like this, Jim, but
It's okay.
I tried during the drought turning the water on and off. I don't think I used the water for 2 minutes, but it wasn't so bad. I couldn't listen to the news during that time, but I did survive.
So let me understand. You wet yourself. You then, if to use Marjorie's expression and blame her, you soap up your bits, whatever they are.
Yep.
And then you turn the water back on to unsoap yourself up? Is that what you do?
Exactly. My brother-in-law, who was a Marine, he used to get angry at the children for taking too long of showers. He would control the water that way, so that's how they had to take a shower.
I'm sure that's responsible. Last question, though. Is there any, I get great joy in my morning shower. Is there any joy in what you described?
I don't get great joy in the shower, Jim.
Okay, well, some of us, well, excuse me. Some of us do. Hey, Colin, thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
But it is true, though. The teenagers, they're in there for a half an hour. I mean, they can go through the entire hot water tank.
Well,
if you get
that's
somebody
probably
that's
irresponsible.
14, 15, 16 years old, that's really outrageous. 877-301-8097 is the number you can call us or text us at that number to discuss whether you are willing, for the sake of the climate and the sake of your microbiome. Do you know what that is, Jim?
I still don't know. You asked me 5
I think
minutes
it's something
ago.
to do
I
with
didn't
your
know that.
skin.
When was the last time you took a sponge bath? I mean, you are so full of it. When did you take a sponge bath?
Yesterday.
No, you didn't. If you're watching on YouTube, Marjorie looks down.
You know,
am I going to
sometimes-
tell the truth or am I?
You know, sometimes it's you get caught short. Somebody's coming over, and your bits aren't what you want your bits to be, kind of thing. Or maybe your soles aren't what you want them to be, and you just do a quick, with a warm face cloth and
Now, let me
fix
tell you,
everything up.
if you ever encounter Marjorie out in public, the way to know that Marjorie's making something up, which she generally does not do, is when she doesn't make eye contact. When Marjorie can't make eye, which she cannot do with me now, when she cannot make eye
I'm
contact.
looking right at you, Jim.
Sure, yeah.
Just
After
yesterday.
you told the story you just told a couple of minutes ago.
Brian and Paxton, thank you for calling.
Hey, Brian, what's up? Brian, say something.
Hi, Brian. You there?
Okay, excellent call, Brian. Put him on hold. We'll get back to you. You know, I feel when people do that, I feel like they think we called them. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think there's some misconnection with the phone.
There is?
I think so.
Brian, don't
Jim,
go away. We'll try
Jim
again in a minute.
Situate, thank you for calling.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, good afternoon. I know you guys didn't call me.
That's correct. We did not.
So you may find this interesting. Back in the day when I was in the Coast Guard, we had a thing called sea showers.
What's that?
Where you stepped into the shower, you got wet very quickly, turned the water off while you lathered up, and then rinsed off very quickly. The whole shower didn't take more than 90 seconds.
That's what that guy, first guy just said. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
But back then I had hair. Now it's even quicker.
That's right. Hair is a problem. It elongates the entire process, Jim. I'm absolutely
Jim, you're not
down
in the
on
Coast
that.
Guard anymore. Do you still do this?
I take very quick showers, Jim. It's a habit I guess I developed way back then.
Okay. Good luck to you. Jim, thanks for the call.
This is Sharon from Waltham. I feel her pain. She says a 2-minute shower is a usual event for me because that's how much hot water I get after one of my 3 daughters goes
Well,
first.
that's a problem. Do you have an outdoor shower at your place on the Cape?
I do. It's
How
a
great
wonderful
is an
thing.
outdoor?
It's
Is
great.
that a great thing?
Yes, it's absolutely wonderful. It's absolutely great. And
Why don't you do a sponge bath on the Cape instead of an outdoor shower, Marjorie, if they're so great?
Well, you do them all the time. I told you do them when you get caught short and somebody's coming over and you think maybe you're not as fresh as a daisy as you want to be. So you just do something really, really quickly. Rebecca from Back Bay has straightened us out, Jim. She says it's the naughty bits. That's what she says.
Well, we did a show. Let me tell you, one of the people, when we do an event, people often ask us, what's the difference between your old radio station, commercial radio, and being lucky enough to work in public media at GBH? The difference is we did a whole hour on washing your dirty bits on the old radio station, and we obviously can't do that here. By the way...
She didn't say dirty bits. She said naughty bits.
I know, I'm saying that's what we did. By the way, Jamie just sent us a note. Jamie is our colleague here. I just can't do it. It's the only time I get to myself away from a 3-year-old family text work. 2 minutes, it just isn't enough to escape. And I don't have a 3-year-old, but a similar thing. You totally get away from the world.
It is
probably
true.
as well as anything you can do.
No, a friend of mine, a mother of 5 kids, she would talk about how she would announce she was taking a bath, and she would go in the bathroom and lock the door and stay in there for half an hour, and no one could get in and no one could bother her. So I get that part
It's
too.
great solitude.
Brian from Paxton is back. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Brian. What's up?
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what happened.
Totally
It's okay.
So
I was telling the screener that, there's 330 million people in the United States, and we all flush perfectly drinkable water down the toilet 6 times a day. It's like crazy that we're not addressing that.
Well, I generally drink out of the toilet, don't you?
No, I mean, it's crazy that we're one of the only countries that flushes that much water down the toilet.
Oh, that part. Well,
every day.
you can get those toilets that are not that wildly expensive, that obviously have been in use in Europe forever, where you press one button and it gives you a light flush as opposed to the other one that gives you a big time one. You know what I mean, Brian?
And then, yes, and we're fans of if it's yellow, let it mellow.
Beautiful. I'm so glad you shared that with us, Brian. Thank you for getting that in. It's a great bumper sticker.
Thank you. Paul from Worcester says he sometimes takes a short cold shower because it gets you moving really fast to get clean.
A lot of people are doing that, including some people in my family. It is real. It is. You ever done it?
No.
You ever? By the way, this has nothing to do with showers. You ever gotten into one of those? This is a new thing. I did this in Montreal once at some health club kind of thing. You ever get in ice cold, freezing water, submerge yourself? That's like a huge health thing kind of thing.
No.
It is horrible and painful and masochistic in
So
my
why?
estimation.
So why do you want to do it then?
Because some people are masochists. That's why they get off on that.
Why are people in your household taking cold showers?
Because it's supposedly a big. I mean, it's like they don't want their biomes to get screwed up,
microbiome,
whatever they are.
I think that's something to do with your skin.
I don't know what
I'm
it
not
is
really
either.
sure.
In any case, 877. Well, the lines are full. What's the point, Jim? Becky. No, you're not Beckford. You're Becky in Westford. Sorry about that, Becky. How are you? Beckford is actually a very good name. I would suggest you think about it, Becky. But go ahead.
I will. So I was on a safari in Africa a couple years ago, and we were there about 2 weeks. And during that time, we were allowed to shower every couple days, and very limited time. I think they limited us to maybe 15 or 20 gallons, and they warmed up the water by solar.
Wow.
And then we had basically, once it was done, it was done. So you had to turn the water on, soap up, turn it off, rinse, turn the water on and off. But because we could only do it every couple of days, it felt wonderful.
Now, how far would you get on 10 gallons of water, Becky?
I just looked it up. A typical shower in this country is 17 gallons of water.
17 gallons
I
of
didn't know it was
water.
that much either.
God.
But go ahead, Becky.
Think
What's
about
the answer?
that, Jim. Think about that when you're in the shower,
it's horrible.
going through all those gallons of water. Go ahead, Becky.
I mean, it felt a little bit. It was a little anxiety producing because you didn't want to run out when you were full of soap.
That's right.
But it worked.
I'm anxious just thinking about it. What happens if you do run out when you're all soaked up? Do you have to go to a friend, or what do you do?
Yes, you would call the guys and say, hey, can you pass me a sponge? And
Can I have a pint? I got it.
Have a pint.
Hey, Becky,
Okay.
thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
This is from a texter. I'm not sure exactly what it means,
Was
but
it-
I'm curious, so I'm going to read it anyway.
Please.
I am following my grandmother's advice and taking a Dickey bird bath. You ever heard of a Dickey bird bath?
Sure.
Basically, the pits and bits and anything else that might need it. That, according to the texter, is a Dickey bird bath.
Well, first of all, I'm not
Does
sure
that
you
mean
should
you
be
wear
saying
a
Dickie
Dickey?
bird bath on the radio, but
I was thinking perhaps of the thing that you used to wear as a
this
teenager,
is 2 days
Jim.
in a row you've worked Dickies into the conversation on the radio. For our younger listeners, Marjorie's always doing this. A Dickie, which admittedly I did wear quite frequently when I was young, a Dickie is sort of like a bib.
Yeah.
It's a faux turtleneck.
Mock
You have
turtle,
the
mock turtleneck.
And you have like a little rectangle beneath it.
Yeah.
in lieu
Or-
of a
or
full
semicircle.
turtle. But one of the issues that no one has
Yeah.
ever resolved, we should do a whole segment on Dickies because that is really fascinating soon. Why did we not wear the whole turtleneck? What advantage do you get by just wearing the
I have
little
no
bib
idea.
thing?
I don't know. It was a fad for a
very
long
good
time. I
point.
remember them from my junior high school days, too. And Texter wants to know if you can offset your water use by switching from flushing to a litter box.
Thank you. That's Marjorie texting in. Jerry and Norton, you have not much time, but go ahead. How are you, Jerry? Welcome.
Well, hello.
Hello.
I'm calling from Norton, and I wanted to tell you that when I was 22 years old, and I'm now in my 60s,
Yeah.
I traveled in Spain,
Yeah.
and when I would go to a pension, they would say, oh, you must be from America. You guys are ugly Americans. You use too much water.
Yeah.
So here's how I want you to shower, or you can't have the room. I want you to wet, soap up, shut the water off, soap up, turn the water on, and then rinse.
You're the
So
third
and I've
person
been
who said
showering
that.
ever since then.
Wait, you what?
I've been showering that way ever since then.
Really?
Because I hated to be viewed as an ugly American, and we are ugly Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are very.
That's pretty deep there,
We
Jerry.
do go through a lot of the.
Jerry, thank you.
We're very wasteful, I guess.
But by the way, even before there was a climate crisis, at least we were aware of, you and I, we've been to Europe, I've been to Europe, there is a lot less, the showers are much less of a central part of life, at least long showers there than they are here. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. A lot of people are talking about these 5-minute Navy showers.
That's what they were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You soap yourself up, you turn it's what all three of these people are talking about.
But it seems like it'd be a lot faster than 5 minutes,
well, maybe
doesn't
2
it?
minutes, whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay, we have time for one more call.
We don't? Well, maybe we
Maggie
do.
and Waylon, gotta be
30
quick.
seconds,
I'm sorry.
Maggie.
We're almost done.
Okay, hi, it's Pickleball Maggie.
Oh, hey, Pickleball Maggie. How are you? What's up?
Yeah. The problem I have is that it takes 2 minutes to warm up the water in my shower.
That's a real problem.
And I don't take cold showers.
No.
And Marjorie,
yes.
I thought the litter boxes were for the emotional support cats that they use in the high school.
No.
No, that would not be
No,
it.
that's not. That's
But
not.
thanks, Pickleball Maggie.
It's a made-up thing. It's a made-up thing, Maggie. But thank you very much for calling.
Thank you.
And for talking about pickleball.
That is a problem. If you live in a house where it takes a while for the water to heat up, that is a conundrum.
Well, I think that's a lot of our houses. It takes a while for the water to heat up. Anyway, we're done for today. Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thanks to people who came down here to the Boston Public Library. We really appreciate that. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. Tomorrow, we are hosting a debate on Ballot question 4, I should say, driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. You can call and text your questions at 877-301-8970. Wait till tomorrow, though, so they don't get lost in the shuffle. We're also going to hear from national security expert Juliet Kayyem, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, Milk Street's Kitchen's Chris Kimball on his new cookbook, Cook What You Have, as in anything hanging around in the kitchen.
You know what
or
I'm
the
doing
fridge.
tonight? I am
You're
making from the
something.
cookbook
I
the
know.
national dish of, you ready? Uzbekistan.
Well, that's good. I will not be making anything. I hope you don't mind.
I'm making it tonight.
Okay. And by the way, we also got Wall Street Journal personal technology columnist Joanna Stern. We can't wait to talk to her. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas. Additional support provided by Gia Orsino. Our engineer is John The Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. And thanks to our BPL team, Steve Baracci, Chris Kelly, and Evelyn Brito. What's on TV?
Well, we have a couple of experts in the area talking about how nervous we should or should not be about Elon Musk taking over Twitter, and obviously with the elections coming up and beyond. And secondly, I watched a film, a frontline film that's on tonight, called Putin's War at Home, about journalists and average people who've had the courage to stand up to Putin at great personal risk. It is one of the most inspirational things I've ever seen. The director of the film is going to join me tonight.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you can tune in tomorrow. Meanwhile, have a great day.